Chapter 2187. Master, he's already turned into dregs. What do we do now? We can't put it back together, Connie said with pursed lips as he walked beside the sealed Cthulhu and looked at the minced meat on the ground. Rex was silent for a while before he said, "Forget it. Everyone has seen it anyway, so it's considered revenge." That's true, but letting him die so easily is letting him off too easily. Connie was indignant. One had to know that hundreds of thousands of orcs had died because of this fellow, and he was gone so easily. It was an insult to them. But the war is over, and everything can be peaceful again. We even have 100 years of peace. That doesn't seem too bad. A smile appeared on Connie's face again. If today's war had been a racial war, the casualties of the various races would have been even more severe. Rex nodded. He looked at the orcs and knights drinking from the same wine flask, and a smile appeared on his face. Moreover, this war seems to have changed this world. Yes, it seems like Chaos City is vaguely here. Connie nodded. It was an indescribable feeling, but it just felt like it. On the battlefield, the back-to-back trust forged a friendship that transcended life and death. He believed that even if the war ended and all the Allied armies returned to their respective bases, this seed in their hearts wouldn't disappear. It would take root and sprout, and perhaps grow into a different flower. Many things could happen in 100 years. Chaos City was created out of nothing, and Lantis also appeared suddenly. What about the next 100 years? It actually made one look forward to it. The Tree of Life gave its core to you? Helena came to Irina and looked at her in a daze. So what if it did? Irina looked at her without saying anything. Helena's body swayed, and her face turned pale. She turned and left. Irina looked at Helena's back view with a frown. She was a little confused, but she also felt a little empty in her heart. The joy of winning the war spread across the Gus mountain range. Even the munition factories at the back were cheering. Our luck is pretty good. We craftsmen don't need to go to the front line. Mabai picked up the wine jug and took a few gulps before throwing it to Lulu with a smile. Lulu picked up the flagon and drank a few mouthfuls of wine with a silly smile. She looked tenderly at the white fox, which was hiding in his arms and poking out its little head. She thought that Cece would like this little fellow. Boss, are you all right?" Mond asked nervously as he looked at Douglas, who opened his eyes in a daze. Cough, cough. Douglas coughed twice, which aggravated his wound. He couldn't help but frown. However, when he opened his eyes and saw Mond, Keel, and the others surrounding him, he still said angrily, "Why are you surrounding me? Are you deserters?" "No, boss. The war is over. We won." Keel hurriedly shook his head. "He won?" Sargers was a little confused. Before he passed out, he saw countless ancient corpses rushing over. It didn't look like it was over. "Yes, I heard that Alex suppressed and sealed that demon, and then all those ancient corpses turned into ashes. We won," Keel said with a nod. "That's great." Sargers clenched his fist excitedly, which aggravated the wound on his chest. He grimaced in pain again. "Boss, you'd better lie down. An elf healed you just now. She said you need to rest for a while to recover," Mon said naively. "You little fellow." Sargers reached out and patted him on the head with a smile. "It's so good to be alive. When I go back, I can eat Mr. Max Ruggiamo again." In the meeting hall of the command center, all the representatives and powerhouses were gathered together. Everyone looked at Meg with admiration in their eyes. On the day of the selection of the commander, everyone looked up to Meg for his powerful abilities. However, today's overwhelming victory showed Alex's powerful commanding ability. The final casualty count hadn't been sent up yet, but it should be below 30,000. One had to know that they were facing an undead army of 1,000,000 fearless soldiers, but they won this war with such minimal casualties. Not a single ancient corpse was able to break through the defense line. Meg looked at everyone and said from the bottom of his heart, "I'm proud of everyone here and every soldier of the Allied army on Gus' defense line." This was a war. Perhaps his sword had deeply affected the outcome of the war, but the war wouldn't have ended so quickly if it weren't for the resistance of the millions of Allied soldiers. Everyone smiled and felt gratified. The war is over. The threat brought by Cthulhu has been temporarily removed. Meg looked at everyone and solemnly said, but we don't know how many powerful demons like Cthulhu are still sealed on the Northern continent. We also don't know when they will come out to harm the human world. I hope that this 100 years of peace will be a new beginning. I also hope that everyone can make this precious peace last longer. I hope that all of you will remember who fought alongside you here today to seal the terrifying enemy. Next time, we can still stand side by side like this, facing our common enemy with the tip of our blade and the tip of our sword. The hall was silent for a while, and then there was a round of applause. Michael looked at Meg and nodded with a smile. If he wasn't already married, I would really want to marry my daughter to him. Can you bear to? Roland asked with a smile. Michael thought for a while and shook his head. I really can't bear to. My daughter is still young. There's no hurry. Roland smiled. He was disdainful of his old partner who spoiled his child. Dominic looked at Meg with mixed feelings. He could tell that Alex was extraordinary back then, so he groomed him as the successor of the Empire's marshal. What a pity what happened later made him stand on the opposite side of the Empire. The intelligence that he displayed today was already above his, and his foresight was far beyond his. He really did what a commander of the Allied army should do. Even he couldn't help but think about what it would be like if all the races could coexist peacefully or even integrate with each other. Chaos City seemed to have used 100 years to prove that it wasn't impossible. However, such a change would definitely cause a huge rift within each race, and power would become the biggest obstacle. Dominic didn't have much hope for that. Whether it was the current king or Sean who might become king in the future, there were not people who could give up power. Not everyone could give up power. Most people couldn't be as carefree as Alex. Chapter 2188. The war had ended. After the revelry at the front line, the Alliance army began to organize a retreat. As the number of casualties was controllable, the injured received appropriate treatment. The giant dragons even took the initiative to send Chaos City and the Night Elves back to Chaos City. Of course, this was also because it was on the way. Meg was not in a hurry to leave. Although Cthulhu was sealed, it was not over yet. Jonas joined forces with several 10th-tier formation masters to set up several powerful spell formations outside the sealing spell formation. While reinforcing the spell formation, it was also to prevent others from breaking in and removing the seal. Apart from that, the various races also stationed 10th-tier powerhouses to guard the area and set the rules of rotation. The duration was 3 years, and the first round would be guarded by the Roth Empire, the giant dragons, and the orcs. Apart from that, Rankster, who had yet to wake up, was also a problem that gave Meg a headache. Elizabeth was still waiting beside Rankster with a worried expression. She looked much thinner after leaving Amy's for more than a month. Lewis and Douglas stood at a distance. They were also troubled by how to solve Rankster's problem. Irina had already used the Holy Light technique to perform a few rounds of deep cleansing on Rankster and dispel all the black demon aura in his body. However, Cthulhu was so cunning. No one knew if Rankster could really regain his consciousness. Rankster was very powerful and dangerous. Furthermore, they still did not know how he became possessed. These were all things that needed to be traced back. After Irina treated Rankster's injuries again, Rankster, who had been unconscious for a few hours, finally woke up. His eyelids moved, and he opened his eyes. It was a pair of clear golden eyes. He was stunned when he saw the snowy scene. He tried to stand up, but he was trapped by the seal and could not move. "Father!" Elizabeth could not hide her excitement as she called out to Rankster. Rankster looked up at Elizabeth. After a moment of silence, he said, "Elizabeth?" "Yes, father. It's me, Elizabeth." Elizabeth quickly nodded. She looked at Elizabeth, who was trapped by the seal, with heartache in her eyes. "Why are you here?" "That devil." Rankster seemed to have suddenly thought of something, and his expression suddenly became tense. Golden light shone from his body as he tried to break free from the seal. "The demon has been resealed. Father, you don't have to worry. We're safe now," Elizabeth quickly said. "There seems to be no problem," Irina whispered to Meg. "I still need to observe a little more." Meg was noncommittal. Back when Joshua was being controlled by the demon, he did not show any signs of abnormality and fooled countless people. Douglas and Lewis were also overjoyed. If Rankster could regain his consciousness, it would undoubtedly be a good thing for the giant dragons. Has it been sealed again? Rankster was slightly taken aback. His gaze turned and landed on Meg, who was standing at the side. He was shocked. "Alex, why are you here?" However, a pained expression soon appeared on his face, and some messy memory fragments began to flash in his mind. "Father." Elizabeth looked at him nervously. After a long time, Rankster digested those memories and sighed with a grave expression. "I am a sinful dragon." Meg stepped forward and said to Rankster, "It seems like you have remembered some things. You don't have to be too guilty. However, we need to know what happened between you and Cthulhu. Why did you appear in the sealed cave under Dragon Island? And why did you follow Cthulhu here?" Rankster pondered for a while and said, 3 years ago, I discovered that ancient ruin under Dragon Island. Because there was black demonic aura leaking out, and there was a terrifying aura, I stayed behind to watch and observe. However, I did not expect that black demonic aura to slowly erode my consciousness, and I was finally controlled by it. When it escaped, I tried to kill it, but I was far from being its match and was completely controlled. After that, I lost all my memories. However, I remembered some fragments just now. It brought me to the ice field and started to dig and summon ancient corpses. And I even fought before, and I also killed humans and my tribesmen. Rankster's voice was a little low with deep self-reproach. As a proud, giant dragon, he could not accept becoming the devil's accomplice and bringing disaster to this world. Moreover, he had personally killed dozens of giant dragons and hundreds of allied forces. His hands were stained with the blood of many innocent people. Meg nodded slightly. It was not much different from what he had expected. Before this, almost no one knew what kind of existence the Great Old Ones were. Rankster was controlled by Cthulhu when he was unprepared. After he failed to resist, he became a puppet. However, with the will of a powerhouse, he at least managed to preserve his own consciousness. For someone with a weak will like Josh, his soul was quickly devoured, and he became a tool. How is your body condition now? Can Cthulhu still exert any influence on you? Does his aura still remain in your body? Meg asked. This was very important. Elizabeth also looked at Rankster nervously. Douglas and Lewis looked at each other. This concerned whether Rankster could regain his freedom. Rankster closed his eyes, and his body glowed with a faint silver light. Not long after, wisps of black gas were forced out from between his scales. They dissipated after coming into contact with the sealing array formation. Rankster opened his eyes and calmly said, "The demonic aura that I can sense has been expelled from my body. It should be because Cthulhu has been sealed. I'm no longer affected by it now." Meg nodded slightly. He looked at Lewis and Douglas. These two were respected seniors of the dragon race, and they were considered to be people who had a good relationship with Rankster. Douglas stepped forward and looked at Rankster. Then he looked at Meg and said, "Alex, Rankster was controlled by the devil previously, and that was why he did all kinds of killing. Now that he has regained his consciousness, we dragons hope to let him return." Lewis also nodded and said, "We can't blame him for this. We all know how powerful Cthulhu is. It is already very difficult for him to retain his consciousness. If he continued to kill each other, he would only fall into Cthulhu's trap." That's good too. This was not Rankster's fault. Now that he has broken free from Cthulhu's control, it is naturally the best that he can start his life again. Meg nodded. Even if it was for Elizabeth and Yabamiya, he would not make things difficult for Rankster. Moreover, just as the two of them said, Cthulhu was an existence beyond the knowledge of this world. Being controlled by him was not something that anyone could change with their will. End of chapter. Chapter 2189. After the seal was removed, Rankster's body shrunk, and he became an uncle in silver armor. His face was chiseled, and his eyes were filled with the vicissitudes of life, but he was still handsome. He exuded the aura of someone with a story. He looked exactly like the number one uncle that young ladies like the most. Father. Elizabeth jumped into Rankster's arms, but she still couldn't hold back her tears. The last time she hugged her father like this was many years ago. She had almost forgotten this feeling. She was already very satisfied to be able to hug her father like this after going through all kinds of despair. Elizabeth, I'm sorry. Rankster patted Elizabeth's back gently with tears in his eyes as he spoke in an apologetic voice. The father-daughter relationship didn't last for long. Rankster cupped his hands at Meg and said, "Thank you for saving me." Meg nodded slightly and said, "What are your plans after this?" Rankster's power had already surpassed 10th tier. Although he was still a long way from becoming a god, it wasn't completely hopeless. "I will go to a place where there is no one, and use my life to repent for my sins," Rankster said calmly. "Father." Elizabeth's expression changed slightly. She had just found Lantis. Was he going to leave again? Lewis and Douglas were also frowning, but they could understand Lantis' feelings now. After thinking for a while, they still chose to remain silent. "There's no need for that. What happened today wasn't caused by your own will. Moreover, your original intention was to investigate the situation and solve the problem." Meg shook his head and said, "Furthermore, if there's another chance, the devil will break free. The Norland continent needs powerhouses to protect it. If you live in seclusion now, aren't you trying to escape? You have to know that there's more than one devil sealed on the Norland continent." Meg's voice was deafening as he looked at Rankster with a sharp gaze. Rankster was slightly taken aback. He met Meg's gaze and was silent for a long time before he said, "If there's another devil, I will be the first to charge even if I have to pay with my life. It's just that I became a devil and slaughtered the innocent. I'm ashamed to face them." Rankster lowered his head with a vexed expression. The soldiers of the Allied army died on the front lines to protect the Norland continent. They deserve respect and remembrance. However, this was all caused by the demons. They fought for their homeland and their loved ones, so they had a clear conscience. As for you, the one you should be ashamed of is your daughter. Because of you, they have suffered so much. Because of you, they even entered the ice plains alone to find you. They were surrounded by the ancient corpses and almost died. Yet you turned a blind eye to it. Now, you want to run away from the problem like a coward and disappear again. In terms of strength, I respect you as a formidable opponent, but you really don't deserve to be a father. Meg looked at Rankster with disdain and mockery. When he found out that Yabamia and Elizabeth were sisters and were both Rankster's daughters, he equated Rankster with a scumbag. As the daughter of the clan leader, Elizabeth was ostracized in every possible way within the clan. She even almost died in an unfair battle in the arena. Yabamia had struggled to survive with her mother since she was young and had almost starved to death in front of Amy's. Meanwhile, their father, the chief of the Frost Dragons and a 10th-tier powerhouse on par with Alex, knew nothing about this. This was a terrible father and a terrible husband. Meg was a newbie stay-at-home dad, but he still despised this from the bottom of his heart. Rankster's body swayed as if he had been struck by lightning. He looked at Elizabeth, and his lips moved. However, his throat was dry, and he couldn't speak. Elizabeth's eyes reddened again after hearing Meg's words. She bit her lip and said, "Father, I have found my sister. She has never seen you before. Can you really bear not to see her?" "Sister?" Rankster looked at Elizabeth, and his eyes suddenly widened. He took a step forward and grabbed her shoulder. "You mean Yabamia?" "Yabamia." This made Lewis, who was still wondering why Rankster had a child, widen his eyes. However, he quickly understood. That made sense. Rankster was half golden dragon. If Yabamia was his daughter, then it made sense that any half-dragon would have such powerful talent. "Yes, I found her and gave her the dragon origin so that she could become a real dragon." Elizabeth nodded. "Is she doing well?" Rankster was excited, but he couldn't help but worry. Her mother has passed away many years ago. Elizabeth paused. She is doing well now. She is working as a waitress in a restaurant. She is very happy. A waitress in a restaurant. Who is the boss? Rankster was exuding a violent aura. Rankster's daughter was forced to work as a waitress in a restaurant. This was an intolerable humiliation to a giant dragon. "It's me," Meg thought as his eyelids twitched. He didn't oppress his employees. He even gave them a very good salary, good accommodation, and 3 meals. Furthermore, he was the one who picked Mia up with his own abilities. As her father, "You're the one who's amazing. Why are you acting like a doting demon now?" "Father, it's not what you think. That boss is a good person. He took Mia in and helped her out of her predicament. Moreover, she is very happy working there. She wasn't forced," Elizabeth hurriedly explained. Meg's lips curled up slightly. If Rankster knew that Elizabeth had also worked as a waitress at Mamie's for a period of time, he would probably faint from anger. Although they seemed to be evenly matched in terms of fighting, he still won this round in the end. Is that so? Rankster was deep in thought. However, after hearing Elizabeth's description, his daughter Mia had probably gone through a very difficult period of time. He felt even more guilty. When he thought about how that gentle and lovely woman had already passed away, he felt even more depressed. He had let her down too much. If she hadn't met him, she would have been able to live a better life. "Where is she? I want to see her." Rankster clenched his fists and said with a guilty expression, "I owe you and your sister too much. I'm a jerk as a father. I'm not qualified at all. I hope I can make it up to you in the future." "No, father. I'm already very satisfied to be able to see you again." Gloria threw herself into Rankster's arms and sobbed softly. This girl, who was always cold, finally cried like a child at this moment. Rankster, who was a tough man, also couldn't stop his tears from flowing. "Then, let's meet again if fate allows." Meg waved his hand and turned to leave. There was no need for fate. He knew that they would meet again very soon. End of chapter. Chapter 2190. The allied forces of the various races returned one after another, and the job of cleaning up the battlefield fell to the host, the Roth Empire. However, the allied forces fought hard and did not let a single ancient corpse break through the defense line into the Roth Empire's territory, so it was not unacceptable for them to clean up the battlefield. Meg took back the thousands of cannons. Although the technology was irreversible, he still did not want this technology to be overdeveloped. Of course, this battle with the undead army also confirmed one thing for Meg. Even if this was a fantasy world, firearms still had a terrifying deterrent force. Developing firearms appropriately could give the Norland continent an additional trump card when it encountered a powerful threat again. There was still a long way to go before he could lead the Norland continent to open up the technology tree. Not to mention developing battleships and electromagnetic cannons like the ancients. Even popularizing railways and trains would greatly facilitate the communication between the various races and effectively promote the integration of the races. Of course, Meg did not intend to do these things himself. Just like the steam engine and steam train, he only provided the blueprints and some suggestions, and the people on the hill relied on their money and a group of genius siege lions to make the steam train run between the mountains and rivers. Meanwhile, he got 10% of the shares without doing anything. Selling knowledge was much easier than doing it himself. After all, he was just a chef, a man who aspired to be the god of cookery. Running out to save the world, now, was already far from his original goal. Oh, he could not say that. After all, saving the world was to cook better. This was not contradictory at all. "System, I save the world. Is there a reward?" Meg asked in his heart. He had not spoken to the system for a few days and actually missed it. Ding! Congratulations to the host for successfully sealing Cthulhu, completing the mission of saving the world, and successfully extending 100 years of peace in the world. Based on the host's performance, the following rewards will be given. 1. The restaurant's defense level will be raised to the highest level, level 10. It can withstand all 10th tier attacks. 2. You will receive a recipe for spicy chicken. 3. You will receive a recipe for Mousse Cake series desserts. The system's voice sounded with a hint of joy. Meg's eyes lit up when he heard that. 10th tier defense meant that Mamie's would become the safest place on the Norland continent, even surpassing the Roth Empire's royal palace. The spicy chicken was a famous Sichuan dish. It was crispy on the outside and tender on the inside. It was spicy and delicious. Just thinking about it made one salivate. As for the mousse cake, Amy and should like it very much. Meg was very satisfied with this series of rewards. System, why don't you just give me a dozen industrial blueprints? It would be best if they are from the electric era, the kind that can directly lead this world into the electric era, Meg said inwardly. Host, you're dreaming, the system replied decisively. I'm just being vigilant in times of peace. Think about it. Although Cthulhu has been temporarily sealed, there's a chance that Arveza or Hastur will appear one day. A world without a technological tree is really at a disadvantage. Furthermore, there's an ancient being and technology that's tens of thousands of years ahead of the Norland continent in the underground city. If their ruler wants to come and bully us one day, wouldn't the Norland continent be in trouble? Meg said seriously, the system doesn't have the authority to make such a decision. No matter what Meg said, the system remained unmoved. Furthermore, raising the world's technological level suddenly will bring unknown risks to the world. It's not in line with the normal evolution principle. Host, please don't interfere forcefully. Otherwise, you might attract divine punishment. The system warned. Divine punishment? Meg thought of the lightning tribulation that day and raised his eyebrows. It seemed like there was no way to rely on the system to ascend directly. But now that Lantis' underground city has sunk and the passageway between the realms has been opened up, if the ancient being's advanced technology comes directly to the Norland continent, wouldn't it be even worse? Meg frowned. Furthermore, the ancient being's technological level is far beyond Earth's. Their food must be very advanced. This is not beneficial for me to become an outstanding god of cookery. There's limited information at the moment, so we can't evaluate the food standard of the ancient being. However, host, please have more confidence in yourself. Food might be able to evolve to be more concise and nutritious, but taste is determined by the heart. It won't increase because of the advancement of technology, the system replied. Meg pondered for a while and felt that what the system said was right. Delicacies were made by chefs, not engineers. Just like those intoxicating delicacies on Earth, most of them originated from a small restaurant. Meg ended the conversation with the system and then had a brief conversation with Dominic before leaving with Irina. Back to Chaos City? Irina asked him. I want to send you back. I still have to make a trip to Lantis. Meg explained the ancient being blew up Cthulhu's nest and accidentally sunk Lantis. Isn't Lantis at the bottom of the sea? Irina frowned. Then she suddenly thought of something and her eyes widened. It fell into the underground city. Meg directly voiced out Irina's guess. Then does it still exist? I heard there were no casualties. The ancient being is discussing how to deal with this sudden incident. This was the news that she had sent him previously. He was close to Lantis and was one of the few people who knew about the existence of the ancient being. I'm not sure what's the situation in the underground city. To Lantis, this could be a danger, but it could also be an opportunity, Meg added. Meg had a much better impression of the ancient being after she took the initiative to support the northern battlefield, and the ancient being blew up Ar-Ela City, which solved the Norland continent's worries. At least, it meant that they were not a race that thought they were superior, and there was a possibility of communication as equals. Of course, the other party had the ability to flatten the Norland continent at any time. It was naive to think that both parties could sit at the same table. The best situation would be for the Norland continent to develop quietly on its own path. The ancient being would continue to be independent, mysterious, and beautiful on its own. But now that Lantis had fallen into the underground city, tens of thousands of merfolk were migrating en masse. Even the highest leader of the ancient being would have a headache. Irina nodded and did not ask any more questions. Ozzy stopped outside Chaos City for a short while before continuing to head south. Very soon, Meg appeared in the sky above Lantis. From the purple-striped griffin, he looked down at the huge whirlpool in the blue ocean. If the sky in the underground city collapsed, the Norland continent would also leak out. Come to think of it, the people below should be feeling the real downpour now. Oh, it should be a torrential downpour. Chapter 2191. Meg arrived at the boundless sea realm and saw She, who was already waiting there. She set up a simple concealment array to cover up the abnormality of the sea. Furthermore, this place was quite a distance away from the nearest demon island. Ever since Lantis obtained the rights to this sea, the demons rarely entered this area. What's the situation now? Meg went straight to the point as he boarded She's battleship. The message that she sent him earlier was very brief, so he was still in the dark about the exact situation. The hole will be sealed up soon, but before that, Lantis needs to make a decision, she said to Meg. What is it? Lantis fell into the underground world, and they have landed safely with no casualties. However, they are currently under house arrest. Although they haven't come into contact with the existence of life in the underground world, they have seen another world. Therefore, we have decided to give them two choices. One is to return to the Norland continent. We will send all the merfolk back to the Norland continent and erase all their memories of the underground world. The other is to settle down in the underground world. We will give them the original area of our Ela city and let them have a territory in the underground world, she said. This was the first time Meg heard her speak so much. There was a lot of information, and it was very important. Lantis had fallen into the underground world, and it was obviously not easy to send tens of thousands of merfolk back to the Norland continent and erase their memories of the underground world. There were methods to erase memories, but most of them were flawed. It could cause the victim to die or become stupid, and there could also be situations where the spell would be ineffective. The former was unacceptable to the merfolk of Lantis, and the latter was what the underground world was worried about. Therefore, the other party gave another condition for the merfolk of Lantis to stay in the underground world. This way, the secret would be kept, and all worries would be eliminated. Judging from the fact that there were no records of the underground world on the Norland continent, the underground world was very good at controlling people's excursions. Meg pondered for a while before asking She seriously, what kind of existence is the underground world? What kind of status will Lantis have in the underground world? Is there a possibility of being bullied or even exterminated? Lantis had helped him a lot, and Gina was an employee and friend of the restaurant. Meg was very responsible for knowing this crucial information. I can't reveal too much information about the underground world to you, but I can promise you that the underground world is led by the ancients. It's a federation where many races coexist, has a more stable system than the Norland continent, and there are strict laws to restrict it. After Lantis to stay in the underground world, the ancients of the underground world, the ancients, the underground world, and the ancients. The ancient ones would protect the safety of the Federation and gradually support his growth and integration into the underground world. As for exterminating their race, the underground world is also a dangerous world, but it's currently under control. There hasn't been an enemy or force that can wipe out a state, she replied calmly. Is she? Mag stared at she for a while to make sure she was not lying to him. After all, this was an emotionless robot. Lying was not within her capabilities. In that case, joining the underground city would be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for Lantis. This was an opportunity for their entire race to leap directly from the closed underwater world into a high-tech world. To most of the merfolk, the Norland continent was a foreign and dangerous place with a 10th-tier upper limit. But in the underground world, they would have better living conditions and greater possibilities in the future. On one hand, they had to risk becoming idiots and return to the chaotic Norland continent without a stable territory. On the other hand, they had to join the underground world and ride on the coattails of the rich to run towards a better tomorrow. Anyone with half a brain would know which one to choose, right? I will pass on your conditions to the people in charge of Lantis, and they will make the decision themselves, Meg said. This concerned the future and fate of a race. It was not something an outsider like him could decide. She nodded. She looked at Meg and sincerely said, the previous war was very exciting. Even so, I still hope there won't be a next time. Meg shook his head with a smile. There was nothing exciting about a war. There were only countless corpses of warriors lying on the icy plains. Dexter and Gina, who set off early, only arrived at the Lantis Sea half an hour later. They looked at Meg, who was sitting on the griffin's back, and hurriedly urged their flying steeds to get closer. "Master, look!" Gina exclaimed as she pointed below. Dexter looked down, and his expression changed as well. There was now a giant whirlpool on the originally calm sea surface. It seemed to be connected to the bottom of the sea. Someone had set up a camouflage spell formation on the sea surface. "Mr. Meg, what's going on?" Dexter quickly asked. Previously, Meg only said that there was a change in Lantis and asked him to return immediately. However, he did not expect Mr. Meg to arrive before them. Looking at the current situation on the sea surface, his heart sank, and he could not hide the worry on his face. Meg looked at Dexter and Gina and tried to speak in a gentle voice. "What I'm going to say next may be beyond your knowledge, but everything is true. You have to be mentally prepared." "All right," Dexter nodded. Meg had given Lantis a new lease on life, and he was a very trustworthy friend. Lantis sank again, Meg said. "Huh, what?" Dexter and Gina stared with their eyes wide open. "Actually, there's another world below the Norland continent. They call themselves the Underground City. The strange movement below Lantis these 2 days was the old nest of the sealed Cthulhu. There were many small devils there, and the forces of the Underground City blew up the old nest. However, it also caused Lantis to fall into the Underground City," Meg explained. Even with Dexter's knowledge and composure, he was still dumbfounded after hearing Meg's words. The Norland continent had heaven and earth. How could there be another world below? Furthermore, Lantis had fallen from the Norland continent to another world out of the blue? Then what about our clansmen? Gina voiced her concerns. "They're very safe now. You don't have to worry," Meg consoled. Gina heaved a sigh of relief and said, "Then can they still come back?" Dexter also came back to his senses and looked at Meg nervously. The so-called Underground City must be very powerful to be able to open up the passage between the two worlds. Lantis elites had all gone to the northern front line, and the people left behind were not very powerful. They did not know what the situation was like when they suddenly entered another world. "Yes, this is the crux of the problem." Meg nodded. "Now, the Underground City wants you to make a decision. Do you want to stay there or return to the Norland continent?" Chapter 2192. Meg told Dexter the Ancient One's conditions truthfully and gave his own judgment. Dexter was the high priest of Lantis. His position was extraordinary and not below that of the king. He could even make decisions on crucial matters. After hearing Meg's description of the Underground City, both Dexter and Gina were shocked. There was another world under the Norland continent that was controlled by an even more powerful and advanced race. And now, Lantis had fallen into that world. They had once abandoned the Norland continent and entered the richer underground world to build a new civilization. Now, Lantis had the chance to join that world and integrate into that civilization. Mr. Meg has given Lantis a new lease on life. Dexter said with a frown. "What I did was nothing. You should be considering Lantis' future. I hope I won't be a factor in your choice." Meg shook his head with a smile. He knew what Dexter wanted to say. "Moreover, I am happy to see a powerful Lantis and a faction in the Underground City that is kind to the Norland continent." Dexter's eyes brightened as he nodded solemnly at Meg. "I understand." Meg nodded with a smile. He knew Dexter would make a wise choice. To Lantis, this was indeed a rare opportunity. I want to stay in the Norland continent," Gina, who had been silent all this while, said. She was smart. After listening to Meg and Dexter's conversation, she had already guessed that Lantis would stay in the Underground City. Meg and Dexter looked at her. "I want to stay in Amy's and continue to serve Mr. Meg." Gina looked at Meg and seriously said, "You saved me and brought hope to Lantis. You even found a bright future for Lantis. I want to stay and repay your kindness." Dexter looked at Gina and wanted to say something, but stopped himself. Gina had the purest royal blood flowing in her body, and she had extremely high magic talent. If she went to the Underground City, she would have a high chance of breaking through the 10th tier upper limit. She was Lantis' future hope. However, he couldn't refute her words. Mr. Meg's kindness to Lantis was not something that could be repaid with words. "Gina, your parents, relatives, and friends will go to the dungeon. If you stay, you might not have the chance to see them again. Meg looked at Gina with a smile. Silly girl, you don't owe me anything. You should pursue a better future instead of being bound by the so-called gratitude. No, I want to stay at Mamie's not only because I want to repay your kindness, but also because of the loving colleagues and the delicious food. Gina's tone was firm. Although she was blushing at the end, she had no intention of changing her mind. I must stay. I like the Norland continent and this world. This child, Dexter sighed. He felt helpless and wanted to laugh. After all, he was a child who had been learning magic from him since he was young. He was very clear about his character. He was obviously a gentle person, but he was stubborn. Meg looked at Gina and felt touched. He thought for a while and said, I respect your choice. Thank you, boss. Gina jumped up happily. Meg looked at Dexter and said, this is a negotiation between Lantist and the Ancients, after all. I'm only a middleman. Now that you have a preliminary understanding of the situation, I will let the person in charge on their side talk to you in detail. You will still have to decide on the specific conditions and agreement yourselves. All right. Thank you, Mr. Meg. Dexter bowed to Meg and solemnly said, if Mr. Meg is in trouble in the future, please inform us, Lantist. Even if we have to open up the passageway between the two worlds again, we, Lantist, will do our best. All right. Meg's expression was equally solemn. This was a promise given by a tribe that was about to join the Ancients. This promise was worth 1,000 pieces of gold. She left with Dexter, and Meg was no longer involved in the negotiation after that. Lantist was not a naive person, and Dexter was a wily old fox among wily old foxes. Meg did not have to worry about them being taken advantage of. Dexter left swiftly. He gave Gina a crystal ball, gave her a few reminders, and left. Gina hugged the crystal ball and stood on the purple-striped griffin's back. She looked in the direction where the gray battleship disappeared with reddened eyes. This parting might be an eternal one. No matter how resolute she was previously, she was still a young lady. All right, it's time for us to go home. Meg patted her head with a smile. Go home. Gina turned to look at Meg. Yes, the restaurant will be your home in the future. Meg nodded. Gina was slightly stunned. Then, a smile bloomed on her face like a flower, and she jumped into Meg's arms. You are the best, boss. Meg wanted to remind her to talk nicely and put her legs down first. However, he could not bear to do that when he felt the reliance of the young lady in his arms. He patted her back gently. On the way back, Meg said to Gina after she had calmed down, Oh, yes. Before we go home, Gina, you have to make a hard oath. You have to promise that you will not reveal any information about the underground city to a third person. The underground city had strict requirements to prevent any possibility of their existence being revealed. As the Princess of Lantist, Gina had to make a corresponding promise if she wanted to stay on the Norland continent. As for erasing this part of Gina's memory, it was even more meaningless. Even if she didn't know about the existence of the underground city and didn't hear this conversation, how could she explain the sudden disappearance of Lantist? What if all her people disappeared? Tell her that they were annihilated? Then this child would live in pain and hatred for the rest of her life. Since she had chosen to stay on the Norland continent, Meg only had to promise that she would not reveal any information about the underground city to anyone else. Moreover, was the underground city really so unreachable? Since he had already revealed the tip of the iceberg, he was no longer mysterious. The answer to the secret above 10th tier might be found there. One day, Meg would go and see the other side of this world for himself. Gina did not say much and made a heart oath right away. Meg forwarded the image of her making the oath to She and told her that Gina had chosen to stay on the Norland continent. Will I really not have the chance to see them again in the future? Gina asked softly, feeling a little down after making the oath. Don't worry. When you grow up and become stronger, you will definitely be able to see them again, Meg said to her encouragingly. Gina was very talented. She would definitely be able to break through 10th tier in the future. Really? Gina's eyes lit up. Of course. Chapter 2193. Meg brought Gina back to Chaos City. They alighted from the Griffin outside the city and walked into the city. Before they reached the restaurant, they saw a few children crowding in front of the magic potion shop. Meg went up to them with a smile and asked, "What treasure are you looking at?" Amy and Anna and Jessica were all there. They were squatting on the ground in a circle. "Father!" Amy heard the voice and turned around quickly. Her eyes lit up when she saw Meg. She stood up and opened her arms, asking for a hug. Meg picked up the little cotton-padded jacket and kissed her tender little face with a smile. Mwah! Amy also hugged Meg's face and returned a sweet kiss. Then, she happily said, "Father, you're finally back. I missed you so much. I couldn't eat or sleep well these few days." I missed Amy very much, too. Meg felt warm in his heart. However, seeing that the little one's baby fat didn't decrease at all, he could tell that Cece didn't mistreat them these few days. "So, do you want Father to make you a good meal as compensation?" Meg asked with a smile. Amy stretched out 2 fingers and said softly, "If it's just one meal, it doesn't seem to be enough. At least 2 meals." Meg's smile widened. This little one had already learned how to bargain, and Anna were also very happy to see Meg return. "Uncle Meg, you're back. Is big sister Shirley back?" Anna asked with concern. She should be back too." Meg nodded with a smile. Shirley was slightly injured on the battlefield, but it wasn't a big problem. She should be with the night elves now, and might not be disbanded yet. "That's great." Anna's eyes lit up, and a relieved expression appeared on her little face. "You're back. That's great," and said with sign language. Meg smiled and reached out to stroke her head. The little girl was still so well-behaved. "Uncle Meg, welcome home." Jessica looked up at Meg and said in a crisp voice, "Well, hello, little friend Jessica. Stay for dinner before going home. Uncle will tell your mother," Meg said. Okay. Jessica nodded her little head, her eyes sparkling. Just thinking about being able to eat the delicious food made by Uncle Meg made her feel happy. The children dispersed, and only then did Meg see the little white thing in the middle of them. It was an Arctic snow fox that was about the same size as Ugly Duckling. Its entire body was snow white, and it was soft and adorable. It was squatting there, and its bright black eyes were carefully looking around. It was clever and obedient. Lulu brought it back from the north. This little fellow is very well behaved, and the children like it very much. "I'll let them play with it for a while," Cece said with a smile as she walked out of the shop with a pregnant belly. "Yeah, little White is super well behaved. It's white and tender, much cuter than Ugly Duckling." Amy slid down Meg's legs to the ground and reached out to stroke the snow fox's fluffy head. Ugly Duckling, who was quarreling with Black Coal at the side, immediately turned its head to look at the snow fox with narrowed eyes. Someone actually threatened Master Orange's position? Ugly Duckling strode elegantly to the snow fox, and then raised its paw to press on the snow fox's head. The snow fox's eyes gradually widened, and it looked at Ugly Duckling from the corner of its eyes. It trembled and didn't dare to move. "Meow." Ugly Duckling turned its head and meowed at Amy smugly. "You only know how to bully little White. You're not allowed to eat dinner tonight." Amy pushed its fat paw away, and 3 more rounds of running. Ugly Duckling tilted its head with a confused expression. "There's a gathering at the restaurant tonight to celebrate the Norland continent's new life. You and Lulu should come too." Meg looked at Cece and thanked her. "Thank you for taking care of the 2 children for the past few days. The 2 children are very obedient, and Mia and the rest also played with them. I didn't do anything." Cece waved her hand with a smile. "Then we'll come over for dinner tonight." "Okay." Meg nodded with a smile. Then he said to Amy, "Amy, go and invite Teacher Julian over for dinner later." "Okay." Amy nodded. She stuck her head out to look into the magic potion shop and mumbled softly, "They're super obsessed after learning Gamoku." Meg returned to the restaurant and pushed open the door. Looking at the tables and chairs in the quiet kitchen, he felt his body and mind finally relax at this moment. Although life as Superman was exciting, it wasn't the life he wanted. Instead, he could get the peace he wanted in the restaurant. Being the boss of Mamie's was actually his favorite identity. creating delicacies and bringing a sense of novelty and happiness to the diners. This sense of accomplishment was much stronger than killing 100 ancient corpses with a sword. Mamis, your emperor is back. Meg opened his arms and walked into the restaurant. Light stood on his body and cast a long shadow in the restaurant. After a while, Meg put down his hands and looked back. After making sure that no one was paying attention to his actions, he quickly turned around and closed the door. His Chinibu was acting up again. It was too embarrassing. Meg took a shower, changed into a chef's uniform, and went downstairs to prepare some dishes for the banquet. The matter with Cthulhu had been settled, and the new peace treaty had been signed. Currently, this world didn't need Meg to do anything for the time being. But the customers of Mamis needed him. Mamis, which had been closed for almost a month, was under the great resentment of its regulars every day. Fortunately, Meg had prepared a lot of delicacies. When Mamis reopened tomorrow, he planned to launch 2 new staples at once: shaved noodles and hot dry noodles, as well as a new breakfast, soup dumplings. He would also launch Maodai and Hannah's Brewery's rum at the same time. As for the dishes to go with alcohol, the spicy chicken and spicy river snails were ready to be released. However, Meg planned to slow down for a while and not spoil the customers too much. Although he had stood everyone up for a month, he was full of sincerity this time. In the evening, the invited customers came to Mamis one after another. Besides the people in the restaurant, Meg also invited Cece and Lulu, Amy's master, Crassus, and Julian, Luna, and Vivian, as well as Miss Gloria and Miss Hill, who were also invited. Yabamia came, but she didn't see Elizabeth. It seemed like Rankster hadn't acknowledged her as his daughter yet. Shirley saw Elizabeth at the front line of the ice storm and told Mia that she was safe. She was already relieved, and her expression became more relaxed. Let's celebrate the Norland continent winning this war. Meg raised his glass with a smile. We should thank Alex. He ended this war, Crassus said with a smile. To everyone, cheers. Cheers. Dash. Cheers. Chapter 2194. The party ended in a happy atmosphere. Everyone had drunk a lot and left in a drunken stupor. Mag stood at the door and watched the guests leave. Suddenly, he noticed that the snow on the Aiden Square had melted, and the bare branches seemed to be accumulating energy. Perhaps one morning, he would be able to see sprouts on the branches. Spring is coming soon, Irina said softly as she stood behind him. Are the flowers blooming? Are the birds coming back? Amy ran to the door, her eyes shining. There were so many flowers planted in the Aiden Square. Spring was coming, and it was beautiful. Yes, soon. Meg nodded with a smile. He turned and closed the door, shutting it out with the cold wind, and ran down the stairs with a comic in her arms. She handed it to Meg with both hands. A new work. Meg reached out to take it. His eyes lit up when he saw Miss Black Cat wearing a black mask under the night sky. She was sexy and cute. After this period of learning and practice, N-Style was very stable and matured day by day. The comic books in this world were too limited, so Meg took out a series of comic books from the comic books on Earth for her and to learn. The little girl's learning ability was very strong. She fully absorbed the techniques of the big bosses while maintaining her own personal characteristics and honed her own style. It was extremely exquisite, and every detail was impeccable. In this aspect, and indeed had the concentration and speed that cartoonists envied. And speed was really important. Usually, cartoonists would take a few days to draw a cover, but could finish a comic book in this time. Meg flipped open the comic book. The story was basically following the plot of Miss Black Cat's opera, but the transition from opera to comic book was done very cleverly and making the story still captivating. Yes, it's great. I think Miss Black Cat will like it too. Meg nodded with a smile. The completion rate was completely beyond his expectations. And is really a comic book genius. Irina also praised. She couldn't even draw a circle. Don't laugh, you're the same. A smile appeared on Anne's face, but she quickly asked in sign language, when are we going to Rodu again? Meg thought for a moment before replying, let's do it the day after tomorrow. The restaurant will be open for business tomorrow, and the day after that happens to be a holiday. Let's make a trip to Rodu and clean up the tavern. Amy's resuming business meant that the Saipan Tavern was about to close down. However, Meg thought a compromise and asked Miss Effie and Mara to take over. Apart from the fact that they might not be able to make new dishes, the supply of alcohol would not be a problem. Of course, the premise was that Miss Effie was willing to be the hero. He was also curious as to whether the Black Cat Opera House would move into the venue that he had left behind and how it was doing now. How's the situation in Lantis now? Irina finally found a chance to be alone with Meg when they were lying in bed at night. They will probably choose to join the underground city and leave the Norland continent forever, Mag said as he repeated his conversation with she and Dexter to her briefly. Then, Gina chose to stay. She said she likes the restaurant and everyone. She doesn't want to go to the underground city, so she made a heart oath and decided to stay on the Norland continent, Meg explained. Gina is a good lady. The restaurant will be her home in the future. Irina nodded. We will prepare a generous dowry for her when the time comes. We will be her maiden home. Meg nodded in agreement. What if she doesn't want to marry anyone but you? Irina looked at him with a smile. Will this money be taken out of your left pocket and into your right pocket? Meg raised his eyebrows slightly and immediately said seriously, Am I that kind of person? I don't know if you are, but Gina will stay because she wants to repay your kindness, Irina said with a chuckle. Gina is a good lady. Meg didn't dare to continue the conversation and could only be a recorder. Frost Dragon Island. Fox looked at the man walking slowly into the hall with a pale face. The terrifying aura made his legs tremble, and he finally couldn't control himself and knelt on the ground. Great Elder, save me, Fox shouted as he turned his head to look at Douglas, who was sitting on the high seat. Douglas's expression was cold and indifferent. On the high seats, the elders wanted to say something, but they didn't. They looked at Rankster in his silver armor and didn't say anything in the end. This was the only man on the Norland continent who could be on par with Alex. Fox, this useless fellow, still hadn't broken through to 10th tier even until now. Everyone knew what Rankster's return meant. The Frost Dragon Emperor was back, and judging from his past actions, no one would doubt the consequences of offending him. Even if it was an elder, if they offended him, he would dare to kill them in front of you. Rankster walked in front of Fox and looked at him from above with a cold smile. Beside him, Elizabeth was wearing a long silver dress and also had a cold expression. I heard you want to be the chief, Rankster said with a smile. I. Fox felt that the terrifying aura made him unable to breathe. His voice trembled as he said, I just didn't want the Frost Dragon tribe to be without a leader. Now that you're back, big brother, you're still the only king. Is this the end? Rankster took another step forward. Frost spread up from Rankster's knees, and he was already frozen. Big brother. Chief, please spare my life. Fox knelt on the ground and kowtowed as he begged with a face full of fear. The hall was silent. No one even begged for mercy on his behalf. Rankster bullied the weak on the Frost battlefield that day and almost killed Elizabeth. It would be strange if Rankster didn't kill him today. Even if God came today, it wouldn't be of any use. Rankster couldn't hide the disgust in his eyes as he raised his right hand. Right at this moment, Elizabeth, who had been silent all this while, said, Father, leave him to me. Rankster glanced at Elizabeth and retracted his hand. He nodded and took a step back. Why, Elizabeth, I've treated you well. Please spare me. Spare me. I'll do anything for you in the future. Fox said emotionally as he looked at Why Elizabeth, grabbing onto a thread of hope. I'll give you a chance. See you on the Frost battlefield. Elizabeth looked at Fox coldly. If you win, you can leave. If you lose, you'll die on the Frost battlefield. All the elders looked at Elizabeth in shock. A smile appeared on Rankster's face. This was his daughter. Chapter 2195. Fox's eyes widened, and a hint of joy appeared in his eyes, as if he had found a life-saving straw. I agree, Fox said quickly. Although he could feel that Elizabeth's aura was stronger than before, she should have succeeded in breaking through. However, he was still confident that he could defeat Elizabeth, who had just broken through to the 9th tier. But if Rankster were to attack, he would die without a doubt. Elizabeth, do you want to invite Fox to a death match? Douglas's cold voice echoed in the hall. Yes. Elizabeth nodded. Just a few months ago, in this hall, she had accepted that unfair challenge. But today, she stood here again as a challenger. She had become stronger. Apart from her realm, she also had an understanding of combat. Perhaps she had been influenced by the two most powerful men in this world. Her understanding of combat began to have a different understanding. The Frost battlefield was opened, and almost all the giant dragons of the Frost Dragon tribe were present. The news of Rankster's return had spread all over Frost Dragon Island. When Rankster appeared in the sky above the Frost battlefield, deafening cheers filled the sky. Giant dragons were born powerhouses, so they worshipped and respected the powerhouses even more. Although Rankster had once become a demon, he was still the most powerful demon dragon. Now that he had returned to Frost Dragon Island, he was still the owner of the Frost Throne without a doubt. And Elizabeth's challenge to Fox also made the Frost Dragons excited. This was just like how Rankster turned the tables again and again in desperate situations hundreds of years ago, standing on the stage of life and death. Now, the main character was Elizabeth. History seemed to be repeating itself. Would Fox be trampled into the background, or would he be able to jump out of the cycle of reincarnation and fight back? It was exciting. Rankster sat on the Frost Throne, and Fox and Elizabeth also appeared on the battlefield. Fox had already signed the life and death agreement, and had received Rankster's silent approval. As long as he could win this battle, he would be able to leave safely. His expression was obviously much more relaxed, and there was even a hint of disdain in his eyes when he looked at Elizabeth. This niece of his was just like Rankster. She was always overconfident in herself. Rankster could easily crush him, but she still challenged him and even signed the life and death agreement. Elizabeth looked at him calmly with a cold expression. The battle of life and death begins, Douglas said loudly. Although Fox's expression was relaxed, his movements were not slow at all. A silver spear appeared in his hand, and at the same time, he began to activate his Frost domain. As a veteran level 9 powerhouse, he could rely on his boundless magic power to slowly wear down Elizabeth's spirit and obtain the final victory. As a fellow Frost Dragon, he knew everything she knew. This was where his confidence came from. However, just as Fox opened up his Frost domain, Elizabeth had already disappeared from her original spot, turning into a blurry afterimage as she charged towards Fox at an extremely fast speed. That's stupid. Fox sneered and thrust the Frost spear in his hand forward. At the same time, the Frost domain shrank and condensed in front of him. Ding! The Frost spear pierced one of the afterimages, emitting a crisp sound of ice shattering. A human-shaped ice sculpture shattered and turned into ice shards that filled the sky. Fox was slightly taken aback. You lost. A cold voice came from behind him. A frost dragon with a wingspan of over 100 meters appeared behind him. Fox only felt his back tighten, and he fell into a temporary state of losing control. The sharp dragon claws pierced his body from behind and tore him into two. Dragon blood splattered into the sky, and the entire arena was silent. All the frost dragons looked at Fox, who was torn into two, and Elizabeth, who was gently flapping her wings and hovering in midair, with shock in their eyes. Fox was defeated in just one move, and he was utterly defeated. The clean and neat battle style made all the giant dragons look at Rankster, who was sitting on the Frost Throne. His battle style was like that. Elizabeth! 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 The shouts filled the air above the arena. A proud smile appeared on Rankster's face. That was his daughter. Elizabeth transformed into her human form and walked down from the arena. Her expression was still calm, and she did not seem excited about killing Fox. Rankster has a successor. Douglas looked at Elizabeth and nodded with satisfaction. Josh is dead, and all the war criminals have been hanged. The compensation has been paid. From today onwards, the enmity between the Orcs and the Roth Empire will be written off. If anyone violates the agreement, they will be punished for treason, Connie said solemnly as he sat on the main seat and looked at the chiefs in the tent. But great chief, how can the enmity between us and the humans be written off so easily? An elderly chief said with a frown. Yes, they killed so many of our people. Are we going to let it go just like that? Even if we agree, will those innocent people who died in vain agree? Many tribal chiefs chimed in. It is precisely because of the accumulation of enmity that such tragedies happen again and again. Connie stood up and said to that old chief, 100 years of peace for us orcs to recuperate, for our people to graze and hunt. We don't have to worry about the possibility of war. Once the agreement is over, the war will begin, and tens of thousands of our people will die. You have all seen how powerful the Roth Empire is on the battlefield today. Do you think the orcs will be able to reach Rodu, even if they go all out? The hall suddenly fell silent. Everyone thought of the millions of arrows raining down on them. Even an undead army of 1,000,000 could only die on the battlefield. When facing the Northwest Army, the orcs always had the illusion that they could win. But the truth was, that was only one of the Roth Empire's armies. They had 5 other armies of the same scale. As the chief, I hope you won't gamble the lives of your people because of personal feelings. This only shows that you are a terrible chief, Connie said earnestly. Captain, where have you been? In the Black Hat Opera House, the members' eyes lit up when they saw Vicky, who suddenly pushed the door open and surrounded her. Vicky felt a warmth in her heart when she saw everyone's worried eyes. She smiled and said, I went to an important place to collect materials. I'm fine, don't worry. Everyone saw that Vicky's clothes were neat and tidy, and she didn't look like she had been kidnapped. Besides, their opera house was so poor that there was no need to kidnap her, so they were relieved. Captain, when you were not around, our opera house was closed for a few days. The little bit of popularity that we had just built up after the opening is all gone now. We are running out of food again, Olmi said worriedly. The other actors also looked a little gloomy. They had just gained some popularity, but now they were back to square one. Splash. Vicky threw a money bag onto the table, and a pile of shiny gold coins rolled out. Don't worry. Follow me from now on and eat meat. Chapter 2196. The opera troupe stared at the pouch full of money in disbelief. There were so many gold and silver coins that they almost overflowed from the pouch. There were over 100 of them. Leader, you didn't sell yourself, did you? One of the actors asked hesitantly. The other actors also looked at Vicky, their eyes full of concern. In their eyes, this was the only way their leader could earn so much money in just a few days. Otherwise, they wouldn't have had such a pitiful life for the past 2 years. What are you talking about? Vicky patted the head of the actor who spoke earlier. She coughed softly and said seriously, I earned this with my own ability. Even though the opera troupe didn't quite believe her, they all learned to be obedient and didn't say anything else. All right, you've been with me for so long, but I've never paid you a salary. From this month onwards, each of you will receive a basic salary of 5,000 copper coins. If the opera troupe's tickets sell well, you'll even receive a commission, Vicky continued. Hey, 5,000 copper coins. Everyone's eyes lit up. They had all followed Vicky from a difficult environment. She was the one who brought them out of the quagmire of life and gave them something called dreams. The past 2 years have been rather difficult, but rehearsing and singing together every day to advance towards their dreams wasn't all that hard. Now, their leader was going to pay them a salary, and it was a huge sum of 5,000 copper coins. Here, this is this month's salary. I'll pay you in advance. Vicky took out the pouch and gave everyone 50 gold coins. This is the first time I've ever held so much money in my life. A little girl held the gold coins in her hands, her face full of joy. Forget about you. Even I, old me, have never held so much money before. The previous landlord was so stingy. It was already incredible for him to give us 5 copper coins each time. Olmi was also grinning from ear to ear. There were even tears at the corners of his eyes. The troop members held the money, excited and moved. Vicky looked at everyone. She couldn't help but feel sad and guilty. She waved her hand and said, I'll give everyone a break today. Go out and have fun. buy some new clothes, and eat some good food. Yay! The troop members cheered. They all went back to their rooms to change and prepare to go out. They had been in Rodu for a few days, but because they were embarrassingly short of money, they spent most of their time rehearsing. Even shopping was a luxury. Ibaka waited for everyone to return to their rooms before he looked at Vicky and said, "Leader, I don't have much money. Why don't you keep this money first? We just settle down. There are still many things that we need to spend money on. The rent of this theater's rent." Vicky, was a simple, nice guy. He never thought about what he should do. He always thought about others more than himself. "Uncle Ibaka, keep the money well. We'll go out and buy some clothes later. Look, your clothes are already torn. You're one of the stars of the Black Cat song troupe. You have to pay attention to your temperament." Vicky pushed Ibaka's hand back with a smile. "I know what to do with the troupe. Also, we've already opened for business, haven't we?" The response to the trial opening was pretty good. "We'll officially open for business tomorrow. With our ability, we definitely won't have to worry about the audience." Ibaka looked at Vicky. A smile appeared on his tough face. He didn't force her. He nodded and said, "All right, I believe in leader. Little Mara, will the Black Cat song troupe open for business?" "Yeah, I've been itching to go and see what Miss Black Cat looks like these days. Why hasn't it opened for business yet?" "Exactly. What's an opera? We'll only know if it's good after we see it." Under the big tree at the end of Romo Street, a group of uncles and aunties surrounded Mara, chatting with each other. "Don't worry. When Leader comes back in 2 days, the opera troupe will reopen. I'll invite you all to watch it together then," Mara said with a smile. In addition to practicing her voice with Uncle Ibaka these days, Mara began to promote the Black Cat opera troupe and popularize opera in the neighborhood. The little girl grew up on Romo Street and was very popular with everyone. After she spared no effort in promoting, the neighbors on Romo Street now knew that a new opera troupe had opened on Romo Street and would perform the latest opera. And not only the neighbors, but the guests of Titan Tavern would also be promoted by Mara from time to time. With Mara's efforts, the Black Cat opera troupe, which had been closed for a few days, quietly gained a certain amount of popularity in a small area. Sigh. Although Leader and the seniors are amazing, they don't know how to promote at all. It's difficult to accumulate popularity like this. Mara strolled around and returned to Titan Tavern. She sighed softly and looked at Saipan Tavern opposite, which had also been closed for a few days. She was a little worried. Where did Master and his family go? If this continues, everyone will probably forget about Saipan Tavern. What are you thinking about? Titan Tavern can be revitalized, and Saipan Tavern is only closed for a few days. These days, there are many people stopping at the entrance and asking about it. Ify suddenly appeared behind Mara and said with a smile, "But miss, didn't you say that Master doesn't want to open the tavern anymore?" Mara turned around. Ify was silent and thought about Mr. Hades' suggestion that day. The business of the tavern was so good, but he closed it just like that. This meant that it was really nothing to him. If she didn't take over, Saipan Tavern might really disappear. "Mara, do you want to be the boss?" Ify asked with a smile. "Me?" Mara was stunned and quickly shook her head. "I don't want to. I just want to be a waitress." "Good for nothing." AI Faye reached out and slapped her head. "What a strange design, but looks so gorgeous. I wonder if it can be made in a day." Gloria was holding a design blueprint and looking at the gorgeous black Lolita dress on it. Her eyes were shining as if she was admiring a piece of art. There were a few design blueprints beside her, and they were all very gorgeous clothes. These were the blueprints that Meg gave her at the end of today's gathering. He asked her to help him make a few clothes. In return, he gave her the right to use these blueprints. Meg was more urgent, so he only gave her 1 day. Fortunately, in order to make winter clothes for the soldiers, Suede gathered the best tailors in Chaos City and selected a group of outstanding tailors from the ordinary people. "I have to at least finish a part of it," Gloria murmured to herself as she called Mars in. Chapter 2197. The next morning, some customers who were unwilling to give up came to take a look at Mamie's, as usual. They were going to leave after taking a look so that they could find another place for breakfast. However, They didn't expect that Mamie's, which had been closed for almost a month, would reopen this morning. Open the door. Father, Mamie restaurant's doors are open. Udier exclaimed with elation as he looked at the small plaque that had been removed from the restaurant's door. It's really open. Dicus's eyes lit up too. He had been eating spring onion pancakes with his son for the past few days, and he missed Mr. Mac's breakfast very much. Whether it was soy milk, youtiao, or congee with pork and century egg, he missed them very much. Let's go. We'll eat at Mr. Mac's today. Dicus carried his son down from the horse-drawn carriage and walked straight to Mamie's. There was a small blackboard at the door with the words written on it. Mamie's is open for business today. New breakfast product today. Soup dumplings. New noodle dish. Shaved noodles. Wow, there are 2 new breakfast products today. Dicus's eyes lit up. He was very busy at the city lord's castle. Apart from his rest days, he only had time to bring his son to Mamie's in the morning. Although he could never get sick of Mamie's breakfast, Dicus was still looking forward to Mr. Mac's new products. There was a saying going around in Chaos City's culinary world. Mr. Mac's products must be the best. This wasn't an exaggeration from a loyal fan. It was the truth. Whether it was the superb Buddha jumps over the wall or the half-loved and half-hated stinky tofu, they all proved Mr. Mac's original creativity and impressive culinary skills. Udier looked up and asked, Father, what are soup dumplings? You'll know in a while. Dicus smiled mysteriously. Actually, he also wanted to know what it was. As for the shaved noodles, he was even more curious. Weren't noodles made from poop? Could they be shaved with a knife? Ding! Dicus pushed the door open and went in. The restaurant had resumed business without warning, and the regulars hadn't received the news yet. Hence, the father and son were the restaurant's first customers. Welcome, Yabamiya said with an energetic smile. Hello, Sister Mia, Udier greeted. Udier was a regular customer of the ice cream shop, so he was familiar with Mia. Mr. Mac, no one heard about the sudden opening, Dicus said with a smile as he looked at Meg, who was standing at the kitchen door. Then the guest today must be true love, Meg said with a smile. That's right. He comes every morning to take a look. He's never been so diligent except when he was chasing after his wife. Dicus nodded in agreement and sat down with his son near the kitchen. We've launched 2 new breakfast items today. You can try them, Meg recommended. He and Dicus were old friends, and he was the one who handled most of the matters related to the city lord's mansion. Dicus had already opened the menu. He quickly found the new soup dumplings in the breakfast section, as well as shaved noodles in the noodle section. The white and tender soup dumplings looked translucent and bulging as if they were filled with soup. Just looking at the picture made one salivate. The bowl of shaved noodles was thin and long like willow leaves. It was served with thick bone broth, covered with braised beef, and sprinkled with green onions and coriander. It looked very appetizing. Dicus had already made his decision after seeing the picture. I'll have 2 soup dumplings and a bowl of shaved noodles, Dicus said. He then looked at Udier. What do you want? I also want soup dumplings, youtiao, and soy milk. Udier quickly decided. It was quite like Dicus style. Then I'll have 1 soup dumpling, 1 youtiao, and a bowl of soy milk, Dicus said to Yabamiya. Okay, please wait a moment. Mia nodded with a smile. Meg had already turned around and entered the kitchen. The soup dumplings were still steaming in the steamer. He took a small piece of dough and kneaded it into a thin strip. He shook his wrist slightly and intertwined the strips together. Then, he put them into a pot of clear oil to fry. After a while, the small piece of dough expanded into a large and long golden youtiao. The youtiao was out of the pot and placed on the rack to drip oil. Meg had already picked up a large piece of dough and walked to the boiling pot. He held the dough in his left hand and a square kitchen knife in his right. He turned his wrist slightly, and the knife slid across the surface of the dough. A thin and long piece of dough flew into the pot. Chop, chop, chop. He cut it again and again. The dough leaves almost formed a line. They drew a beautiful arc and accurately jumped into the pot of soup. The soup boiled, and the dough leaves rolled on the surface of the soup like silver fish swimming in the water. It was very beautiful. Udier knelt on the stool and craned his neck to watch Meg in the kitchen. His mouth was slightly open, as if he was watching a master perform. He was completely impressed. Dicus, who was sitting at the side, was also fascinated. Mr. Mac's cooking was like an exciting performance. It was very enjoyable to watch. After a while, the breakfast that the father and son ordered was served on the dining table. "Please enjoy." Mia kept the tray and retreated to the side. The crystal-clear soup dumplings trembled slightly in the small bamboo basket. The bulging soup looked like it was going to burst out at any time. He really poured soup into it. Dicus was astonished. How did such a thin layer of skin manage to envelop the soup? How magical! As expected of Mr. Mac, he always had a strange way of thinking. Dicus couldn't take his eyes off the steaming bowl of knife-shaved noodles covered with braised beef. The aroma of the braised beef wafted into his nose along with the hot bone soup. His stomach, which had been empty for the night, began to grumble as if it couldn't wait any longer. Green onions and coriander decorated the soup. The knife-shaved noodles floated in the thick-boned soup. These two new dishes are amazing. Dicus couldn't wait to pick up his chopsticks. He carved the way to eat soup dumplings on the small bamboo basket. He carefully picked up the top of the soup dumplings and transferred them to a shallow plate. He put one in front of Udier first and started to eat the knife-shaved noodles. He picked up a piece of beef and put it into his mouth. The soft braised beef melted in his mouth. The rich, meaty aroma bloomed in his mouth. It was as if there was a fire exploding in his brain. His taste buds, which had been silent for a long time, went crazy. That sense of satisfaction was the perfect reward for all the waiting. He chewed carefully and savored the intoxicating taste. The tender beef was quickly swallowed. Then he picked up a strand of noodles. Although it was noodles, it was very different from the slender noodles he usually saw. It was thick in the middle and thin at the sides. It had sharp edges and looked like willow leaves. It looked very special. When the noodles entered his mouth, the outside was smooth and the inside was soft but not sticky. The more he chewed, the more fragrant it became. The bone soup soaked it, and the taste was extraordinarily delicious. After swallowing, he took a small sip of the steaming bone soup. Ah, satisfied? Dicus couldn't help but sigh. Chapter 2198. Gulp. Harrison and George, who had just entered, happened to see Dicus eating the sliced noodles. They swallowed their saliva at the same time. The aroma of the braised beef dispelled their drowsiness. The image of the sliced noodles slipping into their mouths made them imagine the smooth texture. Is this the legendary sliced noodles? Yes, I do. Harrison nodded thoughtfully. Mr. Mac, I want this. The two of them said almost at the same time. They looked at each other and smiled like best friends for life. Harrison and George had heard the news of victory yesterday, so they agreed to have breakfast, lunch, and dinner together today to celebrate. There's a kind of joy called eating all three meals together. The way foodies celebrated was just that simple. Their first choice was, of course, Amy's. They came with the mentality of giving it a try, but they didn't expect the restaurant to really open. The two of them were overjoyed, and tears welled up in their eyes. When they walked closer, they saw that there were actually two new products. When they pushed the door open, they saw the scene from before. There was nothing crueler than eating a bowl of braised beef, sliced noodles in front of two hungry foodies. If there was, it would definitely be a steaming hot soup dumpling. Slurp, slurp. Udier came to the plate, took a small bite of the soup dumpling, and then put his mouth forward to suck the soup in small mouthfuls. The fragrant and delicious gravy was still slightly hot, but the little guy tasted it. Although his expression was a little twisted, he couldn't bear to spit out the gravy in his mouth. He opened his mouth and breathed out hot air before swallowing the gravy. In a short while, the gravy of the soup dumpling was in his little belly. He then took a bite of the shriveled dumpling. The thin skin of the dumpling was full of gravy and meat. The little guy's face showed a satisfied smile. Udier ate a soup dumpling and looked up at Dicus, saying, "The soup dumplings are too delicious." "Then have another one." Dicus smiled and gave him another soup dumpling. "Boss, I want this too," Harrison couldn't help but say as soon as he sat down. "Me too," George said as he sat down. "Okay, please wait a moment," Mia said with a smile. You're especially early today. Meg greeted his two old friends with a smile. Mr. Mac, I'm so early every day. It's just that you don't know. You've wasted my effort, Harrison complained. You can't believe that. He's been preoccupied with that little girl recently, George said bluntly. Something good is about to happen. Meg smiled. No, no, no. This kind of thing can't be rushed. Harrison hurriedly waved his hand and smiled shyly. But Mr. Mac, what have you been busy with recently? Why is the restaurant closed for so long? It's hard on us regular customers who are used to eating here. I'm busy saving the world. Meg smiled and went into the kitchen. It's true that he's the foodie who saved the world, George agreed. Forget it. I'll let it go for the sake of these two excellent new dishes, Harrison said with a smile. Harrison and George greeted Dicus briefly. They were all regular customers of Mamie's. Although they weren't familiar with each other, they had shared a table with each other occasionally, so the atmosphere was quite good. Brother, is this dough really that smooth? Harrison stared at Dicus for a while and couldn't help but ask. It's smooth, but it doesn't lose its chewiness. The texture is just right, so you have something to chew on without feeling tired. Dicus took a sip of the soup and nodded with a smile. He then pointed in the direction of the kitchen. There, Mr. Mac is about to start his performance. Let's watch before we eat. It'll be interesting. Harrison and George hurriedly looked into the kitchen, only to see Boss Mag holding a knife in one hand and a ball of dough in the other. The kitchen knife danced in his hand, and one thin and long dough leaf after another flew into the boiling pot of hot water. One fell into the pot, one floated in the air, and one just as the knife was unsheathed, the fish leaped into the air one after another. It was an exquisite performance. When the last dough leaf fell into the boiling pot, Mr. Mac had already started mixing the minced dough. The two of them still wanted more. Only Mr. Mac can cook so elegantly and brilliantly, Harrison couldn't help but exclaim. Yeah, we have to bring Chris next time. She'll definitely like it. George nodded. Only that little baby Chris can watch for a whole day, Harrison said with a smile. His tone was also full of love. Don't you have 3 sons, Mr. George? Mia said with a smile. George's whole family had come to the gathering before. Ah, those 3 brats. They can eat anything, George said nonchalantly. Mia's lips curled into a smile. What a doting demon. Usually, it's already full at this time, and there's still a long line outside. Sure enough, after being closed for a month, many people still don't know that Mamie's is suddenly open again. Harrison turned to look at the empty restaurant. You said it's because people don't know that Mamie's is open again. Isn't that simple? George got up and walked out of the door. He got into a hoarse stance, gathered his energy, and shouted, Mamie's is open. Then, he saw customers rushing out of the restaurant one by one and running in the direction of Mamie's. Fuck. George was shocked. He quickly turned and ran into the restaurant. Looks like sister-in-law hasn't fought with you much at night recently. That shout was full of energy, Harrison said with a smile. I've been winning recently. Of course I'm full of energy. George's lips curled up slightly with some pride. But these people are really crazy. Once they heard the news, they rushed out with chopsticks and spoons in the restaurant. I wonder if they paid the bill. George's expression was a little strange. Soon, hurried footsteps came from outside the door. The first wave of zombies, diners had arrived. Fuck, it's really open. Wow, there's a new product. I used to think that I was the only one who stood up for men in my life. I didn't expect that I would be stood up for a month by a man with a child. If it's delicious, I'll forgive Mr. Mac for now. The customers rushed in and took their seats to order. Harrison's and George breakfast was also served. The two gluttons knew how to eat very well. Facing the steaming braised beef noodles and soup dumplings, they were in their best state. Slurp. Harrison buried his head in the bowl of noodles. The large amount of braised beef was soft and delicious. The noodles were very different from the noodles he had eaten before. The most amazing thing was that the noodles were exactly the same, even though they were all sliced with a knife. It was amazing. George, on the other hand, was unable to extricate himself from the delicious soup dumplings. The thick meat soup was hidden in the thin skin of the dumpling. His insipid taste buds were stimulated with a mouthful of the hot soup. His whole body felt warm. Now that he had another mouthful of the dumpling filled with meat, the satisfaction he felt from the fight last night was completely replenished. A real man wouldn't be afraid of another fight. Chapter 2199. George Roar was an advertisement for the reopening of Mamie's. Customers arrived one after another, and soon the restaurant was full again. So they're back after all. The breakfast shop owners in the southwest corner of Aden Square stood at the door and looked at the long line forming in front of Mamie's, feeling a little jealous. This is the return of the king. Even though it's been closed for a month, it's still your grandpa, one of the owners exclaimed. The owners were a little worried, but the loyal customers of Mamie's were all happy as if it was the new year. I was too careless. This group of youngsters doesn't know how to eat. It's the first day of business, but they're all here earlier than me. Vivian's beautiful eyes widened as she looked at the long line in front of Mamie's. She was a little surprised. She was thinking of bringing breakfast back for her father. He had just returned from the front lines yesterday and had to get up early this morning to busy himself with various matters. He would probably forget to eat breakfast again, but since she was already here, there was no reason to be afraid of waiting in line. The customers of Mamie's were very self-aware. They finished their meals comfortably, paid their bills, and left quickly. They didn't drag their feet and make the customers behind them uncomfortable. As the new products, shaved noodles and soup dumplings were very popular today, and these two dishes lived up to expectations. They conquered the customers who ordered them with their delicious taste. Just the amazing skill of wrapping the soup into the thin skin of the dumplings was enough to convince the customers. As for the process of making knife-shaved noodles, it was more like watching a strange performance. A few children were so engrossed that they even forgot to eat. "Daddy, I want to learn this," a little girl who had just learned how to speak said as she pointed in the direction of the kitchen. "Daddy wants to learn too, but he doesn't agree to it," her father said helplessly. Meg saw many regulars. When he was free, he would greet them. The one-armed knight, sitting by the window and drinking soy milk with his head lowered, attracted his attention. Connie was still silent. His empty right arm was a little dazzling, but the sapphire sword at his waist was still proud. Meg looked out and saw the black donkey eating the sprouts that had just sprouted. Give it to the one-armed knight, sitting by the window. Tell him it's a bonus from the investment. Meg handed a bamboo cage to Mia. "Okay." Mia walked over with the steamed buns. Connie was a little surprised at first, but after hearing Mia's explanation, a smile appeared on his face. He turned around and gestured in the direction of the kitchen. Meg replied with a smile. Speaking of which, Connie was one of the restaurant's earliest customers. Perhaps he no longer regarded slaying dragons as his goal, but he was still that proud knight. He didn't know how long he was going to stay in Chaos City this time. Perhaps he was going to leave on his new companion soon, and then come back here for a short rest. An interesting guest, a steamer of soup dumplings and a plate of Yangzhou fried rice to go. Vivian paid the bill and promised with a serious expression, "I'll carry them in my arms and bring them back to the city lord's mansion as soon as possible. I'll watch my father eat them with my own eyes and make sure that this basket of soup dumplings is eaten in the best condition." Mia looked at Vivian with a smile, but still shook her head and said, "Soup dumplings are not on the list of takeaway items. Get another one." The thin skin of soup dumplings couldn't withstand the bumps. If they were accidentally broken on the road, the soup dumplings would lose their souls. Meg's rules were always strictly adhered to. He wouldn't make it easy for anyone. In order to let his customers eat the food in the best condition, he had strict requirements for takeout. Then what about shaved noodles? Vivian asked meekly. Shaved noodles can't be eaten either. Mia shook her head. The best time to eat noodles was also very short. Once the broth cooled down, the noodles would clump together, and the texture would become sticky and terrible because it was soaked for too long. All right, seems like my father won't have the luck to eat it. I can only let him eat it himself next time. Vivian shrugged and didn't insist. She ordered a plate of lean pork and century egg porridge and a plate of Yangzhou fried rice instead. In the city lord's castle, the city lord's office, Michael had just finished reviewing a batch of documents. He had been at the front line of the ice field for the past few days, and a lot of work had piled up in the city lord's castle. Moreover, all the work that had been delayed because of the war after the peace treaty was signed had to be pushed forward, especially the cooperation plan with the goblins and dwarves. That was the focus of his work for the next period of time. Michael couldn't help but clench his fists as he excitedly said, "When the railway to the dwarf kingdom is opened, the three places will become even closer, and the commercial development will become more active. This is a grand occasion that hasn't been seen in 1,000 years." Gurgle, a loud sound pulled Michael's thoughts back. He frowned slightly. He had woken up early in the morning and hadn't had time to eat yet. Everyone was busy now, so it seemed like he could only eat at noon. "Father, are you not going to eat breakfast again?" The door of the study was pushed open, and Vivian walked in with her hands behind her back. "Why would I? I've already eaten breakfast," Michael said with a smile. He had to prevent his daughter from complaining to her mother. "Humph. In that case, it seems like no one is eating the breakfast I brought. What a pity." Vivian took out the Yangzhou fried rice and lean pork and century egg porridge that she had brought with her and placed them on the table. She opened the lid and said leisurely. The aroma of the fried rice mixed with the smell of the century egg porridge went straight into Michael's nose. Rumble, rumble, rumble. Michael had wanted to save some face for himself and say that he wasn't hungry. He smiled awkwardly. It couldn't be helped. His stomach had its own ideas. "Hurry up and eat. Don't starve yourself. Otherwise, I'm going to complain to Mother." Vivian pushed the 2 sets of breakfast directly in front of Michael with a smile and took out the spoon considerately. "There's so much. Do you want to eat some together?" Michael looked at Vivian with warmth in his heart. His little sweetheart had grown up. She even knew how to dote on her father. "It's okay. I just had breakfast." Vivian shook her head and excitedly said, "Mr. Mack launched 2 new products today. The soup dumplings and knife-shaved noodles are both delicious. It's a pity that they can't be taken out. I wanted to bring them for you. Why don't we go and eat together tomorrow?" "Sure. I'll arrange the time tomorrow." Michael nodded and lowered his head to eat the porridge. His expression was a little strange when he remembered that this porridge was made by Alex himself. After all, he had slain the bone dragon at the front line of the ice field yesterday and lured Cthulhu into the seal to end this dangerous war on the Norland continent. Then, he returned to Mamie's today and opened for business. He even launched 2 new products while he was at it. He let this old father feel the love from his daughter. Chapter 2200. Indeed, working hard to earn money is the most fulfilling life in this world. After the morning service ended, the restaurant returned to its peaceful state. Meg made a pot of braised food and sat in front of the floor-to-ceiling window, basking in the warm sunlight. He nestled comfortably in the chair with Ugly Duckling, who had been abandoned at home, in his arms. Amy, who had a month's break, finally started school again, about a week earlier than the students of Chaos School, and was drawing in the study upstairs. The little one planned to refine Miss Black Cat again and personally hand it to Captain Vicky tomorrow to see if she could get her approval. Irina went to the textile factory as there were many things for her to handle for the night elves. Meg had not opened the restaurant for a long time, but the work of being the head chef did not tire him out. Instead, he felt even more motivated when he heard the praises of the customers. What other job in this world could earn him money and reputation at the same time? Such a job with both fame and fortune was not easy to find. After drinking a pot of tea alone, Meg wrapped Ugly Duckling in a red and blue coat and put it in the bicycle basket. He then took a picture book hand-drawn by and from the bookshelf and pushed the bicycle out. Meg rode the bicycle to the textile factory in the north of the city. The elf at the door was very polite to him, the nominal investor, and let him enter the factory without any trouble. Meg did not disturb Irina and went straight to the empty factory where the printing press from Ultraman's hometown was stored. The huge machine stood in the middle of the factory. The originally dusty surface had been scrubbed clean, and the unknown silver metal had a cold luster, exuding an amazing sense of technology. This thing was nuclear-powered, and it had attracted Shishi's attention the last time it was activated. However, Meg and Shishi were already familiar with each other. At least, they were familiar with each other. However, It should not be a problem to use this machine. For the ancients who could build advanced battleships, a nuclear-powered printing press was not something worth paying attention to. If they really asked, he would say that he dug it out from underground. Moreover, even if the ancients wanted to move it away for research, Meg would have no objections as long as he could get a printing press with the same function from them. After all, he had gotten this printing machine from Amy's system for free, so he didn't feel the pinch at all. Meg placed Anne's picture book in the scanning area. This was Anne's first complete work, The Story of the Little Mermaid. The machine is very advanced, but the operation is very stupid. Simple settings: scan the entire book, print the entire book, and then set the print quantity. Meg pondered for a moment. How about we just print 10,000 copies first? Most cartoonists would be embarrassed to call themselves a best-selling cartoonist if they didn't sell at least 10,000 copies, right? However, looking at the roaring machine and the neat stacks of picture books that were sent out from the conveyor belt, Meg felt that he was a little careless. He hadn't even found a sales channel for the picture book, and he had already printed 10,000 copies. At worst, I could just put it in front of the restaurant and sell it at 1,000 copper coins per book. That's a business worth 10 million. Meg stroked his chin as he pondered. He picked up a picture book that had been printed from the side. The printing quality was very high, and it looked as if it had been hand-drawn. There were no traces of printing, and the colors were vibrant, and the style was bright and lovely. It was an excellent color picture book. A picture book of this quality could be sold for at least 10,000 copper coins in Rodu. This was because before there was a breakthrough in printing technology, color picture books could only be hand-drawn by an artist. For an artist who could draw such an excellent picture book, it would take them a month or even longer to complete it. Even 10,000 copper coins would be considered a low price. Of course, Meg was using a printing machine, so he was cheating. However, 1,000 copper coins could be used as an enlightening reading material for rich people, as a bedtime reading material for young people, and as a good choice for straight men who couldn't get a gift. I heard from them that you're here. Irina pushed open the door and came in. She was a little surprised to see the picture books being sent out from the conveyor belt. This is the purpose of this machine. Yes, this is the printing machine. Meg handed the picture book in his hand to Irina with a smile. Irina flipped through the picture book in her hand, and the surprise on her face became even more pronounced. In the end, she put down the picture book and looked at the machine before her with starry eyes. This is a machine that can print money. Indeed, as a family, she also immediately discovered the value of this printing machine. Get a few people to pack it up in wooden boxes, 1,000 copies per box, and ship one box to Mamie's every day. We'll start selling it today, Meg said with a smile. How much are you planning to sell it for per book? Irina asked. 1,000 copper coins per book. This is a long-term business, so we can't make it into a luxury item. And as a freak with her hands, Meg said with a smile. I have 10,000 copies here. Let's make 10 million to test the waters first. Irina nodded in agreement. After thinking for a while, she said, but the price of 1,000 copper coins will still be looked down upon by many children. Meg thought for a while and said, why don't we print another batch of black and white copies and then sell them through the bookstore at the price of 1,000 copper coins? That's good. Irina's eyes lit up. There are still many night elves who are free now. I can transfer a batch of elves who are good at drawing and sculpting to complete the engraving and printing work. There's no need to trouble themselves with the engraving of the printing plates. This is a super printer, so they can just print the printing plates directly. They only need to complete the printing and binding work. Meg smiled and shook his head. He had already begun to consider the plan to build a simple black and white printer. With this super printer, he could complete the modeling and printing work directly on it. For many simple machines, he could even print all the parts. This was the power of technology. Meg originally had a 3D printer, but that thing had limited functions and could not be compared to this one. It was extremely difficult to play with. All right, Irina nodded. Although she did not really understand what Meg said, she somehow felt that he could be trusted. The printing of 10,000 copies of the picture books was completed very quickly. The elves custom-made wooden boxes, packed the picture books, and prepared to send them to Amy's. Meg set up the printer and directly 3D printed the printed plates of the picture books. The precision was extremely high, and it could be used by brushing ink. Meg wrote a simple manual on how to use it. As for the specific work of choosing the paper and printing, he left it to Ashley to coordinate. The job of printing black and white picture books created at least 500 jobs for the Night Elves. Meg's initial request was to print 1,000 copies a day. After all, this was only black and white printing, so the price would not be too high. The profits could only be increased by the production. As for the market, Meg was not worried at all. The Norland continent would welcome a long 100 years of peace. Meg's goal was to sell and picture books to the whole world. Just leave it here. You two young ladies, please wait for a while. At the entrance of Amy's, Meg stopped the two elves who came to deliver the books. Chapter 22:01. Have you sold any books before? Meg asked the two elves with a smile. The two elves appeared to be around 15 or 16 years old. They had round and adorable faces, and they shook their heads with flushed cheeks. That's right. From today onward, you'll be responsible for selling 1,000 books a day until all of them are sold out. I'll cover your 3 meals a day, and you'll be paid 1,000 copper coins a day. What do you think? Meg offered with a smile. The taller elf's eyes lit up, and she asked, Do we eat at Mamie's? Of course, we'll eat together. Meg nodded with a smile. The two elves looked at each other before replying in unison. Then we'd like to. They had often heard from big sister Phyllis that Mamie's was the best restaurant in the world, and that the owner could cook delicious food. However, due to the exorbitant prices, they had never tasted any of the food before. Big sister Phyllis's cooking was also very delicious, but she said that her cooking skills were not even 1/10,000th of the owner of Mamie's. If they could eat at Mamie's for free, that would be fantastic. I'm Meg, the owner and head chef of Mamie's. Meg introduced himself with a smile. We recognize you, Mr. Meg. The taller elf smiled and said, I'm Molly, and this is my sister, Eve. Molly, Eve, nice to meet you. Meg nodded as he pulled out a human-sized billboard that he had just printed at the textile factory. He then moved the table over and pulled out a few dozen books from a wooden box before laying them out on the table. There are 1,000 books here, and the prices are already indicated on the billboard. Your job is to deliver the books to the customers for 1,000 copper coins, and each customer is limited to 2 books, Meg explained to the two elves. Mr. Meg, we have 10,000 books. Why is there a limit? Wouldn't it be better if more people were willing to buy them? Eve asked with a perplexed expression. Molly was also perplexed. That's because once this book is sold, its market price will be well over 1,000 copper coins. If I take this album to Rodu, I can sell it for 10,000 copper coins, or even higher before the news of it being sold in bulk spreads. Meg explained with a smile, I want more people to be able to appreciate this album, and not let it be hoarded by a small number of people for profit. 10,000 copper coins? Emily's and Eve's jaws dropped in shock. They could not imagine that the price of the sketchbook would increase by tenfold if they were to go to another location. This box will be used to store money. Don't worry, Mamie's customers are all very well-mannered. They will definitely be able to handle it. Meg moved a large box and placed it at their feet, then arranged 2 high stools for them. Thank you, boss, the 2 girls said with a smile. Get used to the working environment first. I'll call you to eat later, Meg said to them and turned to enter the restaurant. He went upstairs to change into his chef's uniform and began to prepare for the lunch service. Boss, are Molly and Eve here to help sell the sketchbook? Phyllis asked as she entered and looked at Meg, who was putting on an apron. Yeah, we're short on staff, so they're here to deliver the sketchbook. I saw that they were quite smart, so I asked them to come and help me. Meg nodded. Ho-ho, the advertisement sign at the door, and his drawing is so beautiful. Yabamia followed him into the restaurant with a smile and said, I'm going to go upstairs and ask our famous artist to come down and take a look at her portrait. Signing is a good idea. Meg nodded. This was a necessary step for a best-selling comic artist. Painting was a lonely thing. Being able to receive positive feedback from the readers would give him a great sense of accomplishment. Then I'll go now. Yabamia ran upstairs and soon came down holding his hand. She led the confused into the door. Annie stood at the entrance of the restaurant and looked at the tall signboard. She was wearing a long dress and holding a paintbrush. She was painting seriously. She could not help but widen her eyes and stand there with her mouth slightly agape. She was stunned. Next to her portrait, there were 2 lines of words. Genius comic artist and first color work. The Story of the Little Mermaid is limited edition. 1,000 copper coins per volume. You're the genius comic artist, Anne, right? Your drawings are so beautiful. Eve looked at Anne and praised sincerely. Anne's Adam's apple bobbed, and she recovered from her shock. Then, a sense of shame welled up in her, but she still thanked Eve politely with sign language. Anne has a small problem with her throat, so she's using sign language for the time being, Mia explained with a smile. Molly and Eve nodded in understanding, and nodded to the 2 of them and turned to enter the restaurant. Her face flushed red. Do you like it? It's your first color work for sale. Meg looked at the blushing Anne, and looked at Meg and felt a little shy, but also a little touched, but she still nodded to show that she liked it. Hearing other people's praise and seeing her drawings placed on the table and about to be sold to others. It was a wonderful feeling. It was as if she had suddenly found a reason why she wanted to do this. Sharing beautiful things with more people. Wasn't this her original intention when she picked up the brush? More people could hear the stories told by her father, and more people could feel the warmth and love. One interesting thing. I like it a lot. And reiterated. That's good. Once these 10,000 volumes are sold, we'll be best-selling comic artists. Meg smiled, and he was also proud of her. As for the signing, and rejected it. The little girl was still a little shy. However, Meg thought about it from another perspective, and was still a greenhorn, and she might not be willing to sign her drawings. So he gave up. It was close to noon, and customers started to line up outside the restaurant. The news of Mamie's reopening had already spread. Those foodies who didn't make it for breakfast in the morning rushed over early, afraid that they would miss lunch. Milo and Garland were among them. The 2 of them looked a lot more haggard after being trapped in Chaos City for so many days because of the sudden war. Garland had a small stubble on his face, which he shaved casually at the inn. When they heard the news of victory, the 2 of them cried tears of joy at the inn and even prepared to set off for home overnight. However, they really didn't want to make this trip for nothing. After all, the new peace treaty had been signed, and the Norland continent was about to welcome a long period of peace. Their magazine's next goal was to sell the Norland continent. Hence, the 2 of them decided to make another trip to Mamie's to see if Mr. Mac was there. The advertisement board at the entrance attracted their attention. They thought it was Mr. Mac's new dish, but when they took a closer look, it was actually promoting a comic. Genius comic artist? And? I don't think I've heard of her. Milo scratched his head. Yeah, newbie? Garland shook his head too. You don't know, but Miss Anne is Mr. Mac's daughter. A regular at the restaurant laughed. Chapter 2202. Milo and Garland were both stunned when they heard that. They looked at the girl on the billboard, who looked to be about 14 or 15 years old. They didn't expect Mr. Mac to have such a daughter other than Little Boss. Not only Garland and Milo, but the customers lining up at the door were also surprised when they saw the 2 elven girls standing behind the desk piled with comic books. Mr. Mac had disappeared for a month, and Mamie started selling comic books as a part-time job after he came back. Moreover, the price of a comic book was as high as 1,000 copper coins. Although Mamie's dishes were never cheap, the quality was very high, and they were recognized by the customers. However, the market price of comic book was usually dozens of copper coins. Just because it was drawn by Mr. Mac's daughter, it was sold at the door of Mamie's for thousands of copper coins. It was a little too much to take the customers for fools. Milo stroked his chin as he said, "If it's 1,000 copper coins, then apart from some limited edition pornographic brochures in Rodu, it's very difficult to fetch such a high price. The only exception is if it's a copy of the original." "Why do you know so much about the market?" Garland sized him up. "I've only heard about it. I don't know much about it," Milo said seriously, trying to hide the fact that he had collected countless comic books. The market in Chaos City is about the same. The comic book market is mostly focused on a younger age, so the price is relatively low. Harrison, who was standing behind them, interrupted. The comic books that occasionally come from Rodu are indeed of very high quality. It's an enviable resource. Great minds think alike. Milo looked back at him with an appreciative smile. Miss, is this comic book really 1,000 copper coins per comic book? Garland asked. The purpose of their visit today was to meet Meg, conduct a new round of interviews, and get his next Colin draft. Whole Foods and Delicacies sold a record 1 million copies in such a turbulent environment with Meg's draft and became the magazine's best-selling issue since its inception. And Whole Foods and Delicacies also successfully secured the top position in the magazine industry with the sales of this issue. They stayed in Chaos City for an entire month, but the messenger pigeons flying to them from Rodu almost never stopped. The boss had given a death order. No matter what conditions Mr. Meg put forward, they had to satisfy him. They had to make him sign an exclusive agreement with Whole Foods American Magazine. This was a man who could single-handedly change the structure of a gourmet magazine. His powerful influence was showing. It was hard to imagine that a chef from Chaos City would one day be able to influence the audiences of magazines from all over the Northern continent. Therefore, Garland decided to get to know Mr. Meg's talented daughter first. Whether it was the style, storyboard, or story, they were all top-notch. From these, one could see the artist's level. If this was really the work of Mr. Meg's 14-year-old daughter, then she was indeed worthy of the title of a genius cartoonist. Is the content and quality of this comic the same as the trial version? Garland looked at Eve and asked. Yes. Eve nodded with certainty. Then I'll take 2 copies. Garland said without hesitation. What's going on? Milo was shocked. A good comic? You want to buy 2 copies directly after reading the trial version? This can't be a scammer, right? The customers also looked at Garland in surprise. 1,000 copper coins for a comic was not cheap. See for yourself. Garland directly handed the trial version of the comic to Milo. So cute. Milo looked at the Little Mermaid on the cover, and his eyes lit up. As a senior otaku, he had read countless comic books and could see the artist's level at a glance. The level was already above 99% of the artists, and the control of the character's expressions was at the top of the pyramid. This was a talent that couldn't be learned. This kind of person was generally called a drawing monster. There was still room for improvement, but this level of painting was enough to make a living. Why is it colorful? Milo quickly asked the same question as Garland. Chapter 2203. He was used to finding the soul between black and white and rough lines. He also often sighed at the artist's exquisite work and the helplessness of being dragged down by the rough printing. At first glance, seeing this exquisite painting full of details and bright colors, Milo was still a little dazed. He flipped open the cover and quickly flipped through a few pages of the comic. Like Garland, he quickly discovered the value of this picture album. A full-color picture book with a very high degree of completion, great style, and novel story was worth far more than 1,000 copper coins. He had a few picture albums drawn by artists in his collection, and the price ranged from 10,000 to 50,000 copper coins. If this picture album appeared in Rodu, it wouldn't be surprising if it was sold for 50,000 copper coins by a rich young lady she liked. I want to too, Milo said without hesitation. It was a profit if he could buy it. When he returned to Rodu, he could collect one and sell the other. He could still make a small profit. How delightful. After the 2 of them saw the trial version, they both decided to buy 2 copies. This piqued the curiosity of the customers in the queue. Seeing the 2 of them fork out money to buy the 2 picture albums, the crowd wanted to know what the picture album was even more. Let me see it too. Harrison was also a picture book enthusiast. He was the player with the most books in the circle of Chaos City. He took the trial version from Milo, and was also shocked by the painting on the cover. There were almost no decent painters in Chaos City, so it was extremely difficult to find a painting book from Rodu. The few paintings he had were of mediocre quality, but they were enough for him to show off in his small circle. And now, the quality of this picture book had far surpassed all the picture books he had. The exquisite pictures and the cute little mermaid were all very lovable. Georgina's birthday was coming soon. Harrison had been thinking about what to give her as a present these days. Now that he saw this picture book, he finally found his target. "I want two too," Harrison said without hesitation and began to fork out money. Harrison was a regular at Mamie's. Many people recognized him. "What is this picture album?" All of them are just buying without saying anything after reading it. "Could it really be a treasure? I like picture books. Let me see it too." The customers discussed, and the trial version of the picture book began to spread among the crowd. "Wow, it's actually a full color. I didn't expect and to be so strong. Mama, the Little Mermaid was so beautiful. I want it. Daddy, I want a Little Mermaid too. If you don't buy one for me, I'll cry. You're already 32 years old. Can't you speak more maturely? A man is a youth until he dies. I want one. I want one too." The customers who saw the trial version were completely convinced by the quality of the drawing. Discerning people had already seen the value of this picture album. Parents were also willing to buy an excellent children's book for their children. After all, the story was interesting and childlike. Of course, the main reason was that most of Amy's regulars did not lack money. 1,000 copper coins might seem expensive, but it was far less than the cost of a meal at Mamie's. Mo, Lee, and Eve frantically counted the money before handing the sketchbook to the enthusiastic customer. After all, this was the first time they had come out to sell. They had no experience and had never seen so much money before. The two of them were a little dizzy from all the work. "Don't be in such a hurry. Everyone, line up and come one at a time." Yabamia's voice sounded as she took the money handed to her by a customer. After glancing at it, she tossed it into the cash box and picked up a sketchbook, placing it in the customer's hand. Yabamia's appearance quickly restored order, and the customers lined up to buy the sketchbooks one by one. "This sister is so impressive." Mo, Lee, and Eve wiped the sweat off their forehead and watched as Yabamia smiled and chatted with the customers. Their eyes were filled with admiration as they watched her complete the transaction. Before the restaurant opened for business, 1/3 of the sketchbooks had already been sold. Many of the customers in the line were holding the sketchbooks in their hands. Many of them could not help but start flipping through the pages and gasp in amazement. "All right, let's stop for a while. It's time for us to go and eat." Yabamia handed the sketchbook to the last customer who came forward. She smiled as she took out the signboard from under the table and placed it on the table. She then locked the cash box and turned around to enter the restaurant with the two young ladies. Don't we need someone to keep watch?" Eve asked softly. "Boss said that eating is the most important thing when it's time for a meal." Mia smiled and said, "Otherwise, not only will you go hungry, everyone who's waiting to eat with you will also suffer." Mo, Lee, and Eve nodded thoughtfully. They then entered the restaurant and were greeted by the sight of Irina sitting at the dining table. "Your Highness." The two of them were startled and hurriedly bowed respectfully. Irina nodded slightly and said, "Go wash your hands and get ready for dinner." The two of them were initially a little nervous, but they were flattered to hear this. Were they going to eat with the princess? "Let's go. I'll take you to wash your hands." Yabamia smiled as she pulled the two of them toward the kitchen. "The picture books are selling well. They're very well made. Eat more. You still have work to do later," Mag praised with a smile as he looked at the two sisters who were sitting awkwardly. He had seen a frenzied rush to buy the sketchbooks, and it was within his expectations. However, he was still a little proud. Mo, Lee, and Eve snuck a glance at Irina, but still didn't dare to eat first. "Let's eat." Irina looked at the two of them and nodded. Only then did the two of them pick up their chopsticks and focus on the sumptuous lunch in front of them. This lunch was simply too sumptuous. There were all kinds of delicacies that they had never seen before, and the taste was beyond their imaginations. There was tofu pudding that melted in their mouths, spicy steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers, crispy and delicious beggar's chicken, soft and sweet braised pork. Mo, Lee, and Eve felt as if they were in a dream. They couldn't believe that such delicious food existed in this world. If possible, they were willing to work for Mamie's as long as they could eat. As for their salary, it didn't matter at all. Could money buy such delicious food? It could, but 1,000 copper coins definitely wasn't enough. After lunch, everyone took a short break, and Meg opened the restaurant for business. "Mr. Meg, You have two outstanding daughters. Garland was the first to enter the restaurant, and he looked at Mag with a sincere expression. He then made his way over to Mag and lowered his voice as he said, I have something very important to discuss with you after the lunch service. Sure. Meg nodded with a smile. After the tireless efforts of Whole Foods and Delicious Food, Meg's fans had successfully exceeded 300,000. It was quite a successful collaboration. MX. Chapter 2204. On the first day of Mamie's reopening, Meg announced that rum would be on sale again at 1,000 copper coins a bottle. However, to prevent customers from misunderstanding, Meg still reiterated that this batch of rum was not brewed by Old Sim himself. It came from Old Sim's granddaughter, Hannah, and was brewed in a brand new distillery in Chaos City using the rum that Old Sim had stored for decades as the base. It was also because of this that the price of this batch of rum became much more affordable. As Old Sim's only successor, Hannah had already made a name for herself in the rum brewing industry. However, no one expected her to come to Chaos City and build a new distillery in Chaos City. Seems like we came at the right time today. We can drink high-quality rum again, the storyteller, Old Carl, said with a chuckle. Previously, he had asked Meg many times about when rum would be on sale again. He didn't expect rum to be back after Mamie's closed for a month. Although it wasn't brewed by Old Sim himself, Master Hannah's brewing skills were still trustworthy. In this world, Hannah was the only master of rum brewing after Master Old Sim passed away. Although she was still young, it was said that the Fok tribe's high-quality rum all these years was brewed by Hannah. There was no doubt about her ability. She used Old Sim's original rum as the base to brew a new batch of rum, so it was naturally something to look forward to. Furthermore, the price of 1,000 copper coins a bottle was much cheaper than the previous price of 1,000 copper coins a cup. Even if they couldn't finish it, they could still bring it back to drink slowly. It was more affordable. Many rum lovers ordered a bottle as soon as they sat down. A rum that could be released at Mamie's would definitely be more than just stepping on a landmine. Meg glanced at the rum on the wine cabinet with a smile. He had tried this rum during the gathering last night. The quality was excellent. Although it was slightly inferior to the aged rum that had been stored for many years, it didn't affect its excellence at all. More importantly, Hannah's distillery could already produce rum in batches with stable quality now. The daily output could reach 1,000 bottles, and the production was still increasing. This was bottled rum, and it was 500 milliliters for a bottle. It wasn't just sold in the restaurant. With its quality that was better than 99% of the rum in the market, there was still room for price increase at 1,000 copper coins. In Feng Yu's previous life, the market leader was Mao Tai, with a market value of trillions. Let's not bite off more than we can chew. Let's set a small target and earn 100 million first. In this world where no distillery had a reputation beyond the local area, Meg intended to make rum into an excellent brand. Selling alcohol was a good business, with little capital and huge profits. This market would start from Mamie's. Then, they would set up rum franchises. After the production had increased, they would begin to expand their distribution channels and gradually sell to the whole world. Old Carl quickly got the rum he ordered. It was a black clay bottle with a wooden stopper. Pulling out the cork, the rich aroma of rum wafted out. It was the unique aroma of rum that was hard to resist. He took the wine glass and poured it carefully. The amber-colored wine gently swayed in the cup. It was clear and translucent, and it was suffused with light. There wasn't the slightest bit of impurities, and it sparkled like starlight. Old Carl raised the wine glass to his mouth and took a sip. The delicate and sweet taste was almost no different from the rum he drank previously. The rich aroma lingered in his mouth and rose. The light feeling made him raise his eyebrows slightly, and the wisps of wood fragrance made him feel even more emotional. If there was a difference, it would probably be in the aftertaste. The rum that Old Sim had stored for more than 10 years had a long aftertaste, making one intoxicated and unable to extricate themselves. This rum had a slightly sweet aftertaste and also had unique flavor. However, it had not been stored for a long time, so it was still lacking in flavor. Of course, this was because old Carl had once tasted old Sim's aged rum before and made this evaluation. However, even with such a gem in front of him, the quality of this bottle of rum still far exceeded his expectations. That little difference was completely negligible. To be able to drink such high-quality rum for 1,000 copper coins, and such a big bottle at that, it was simply too kind. Old Carl could drink such a bottle of rum for at least 3 days. Even if he invited 2 or 3 drinking buddies, it would be enough to drink. Mr. Mac is really a kind boss. Old Carl could not help but sigh. These noodles are too delicious. Milo held the bowl and drank all the noodle soup in it. He licked the corner of his mouth in satisfaction. He was trying out Mr. Mac's new product with the mentality of tasting it. A new product that had just been released today would definitely not have been written about yet. As an excellent food critic, he had a keen sense of awareness. When Mr. Mac's Gourmet magazine was popular, it was not shameful to take advantage of his popularity. It was also a wise choice. Wouldn't it be better to get more royalties? The boss had already said that as long as his article this month was related to Mamie's, his royalties would be tripled. Yes, it was just that overbearing. Milo only wanted to say to this kind of boss who restricted the freedom of the author's creation, please, the more the better. Compared to the minced meat in the noodles of other shops, the braised beef noodles and the knife-shaved noodles almost filled the entire bowl. The small cubes of braised beef noodles were plump and lean with some tendons. They were soft and delicious, giving the customers a more wonderful chewing experience. The noodles were even more special. The noodles were like willow leaves, slightly thicker in the middle and thinner on both sides. They were soft and smooth without losing their chewiness. They were soaked in the bone broth, and every bite was full of wheat fragrance, making people unable to stop eating. The broth was bone broth. Without a long time of simmering, it was impossible to simmer this snow-white, milky bone broth. When the mouth was full of meat fragrance after eating the noodles, you could not bear to leave any soup behind. After eating this bowl of noodles, Milo could only think of one word: how fragrant. Of course, in Milo's heart, he had already written a 5,000-word draft to give a professional review of all aspects of this knife-shaved noodles. Milo felt that he could write about the process of cutting the dough into dough leaves. It was a pity that he could not see such an exciting scene with his own eyes. Garland, who was sitting opposite him, skillfully picked up a piece of dough, picked up a piece of roast duck with skin and meat, and walked it in the sweet sauce. Then he added scallions and cucumbers and casually wrapped it up before stuffing it into his mouth. The duck meat that had just been sliced was still piping hot. The skin was crispy, and the lean duck meat with a hint of fat was exceptionally plump and mellow. Wrapped in the lotus leaf cake, the crispy duck skin and tender duck meat melted in the mouth at the same time. A rich fragrance instantly spread in the mouth. The more he chewed, the more obvious the fragrance became. The taste buds on the tip of his tongue were completely activated, and he sucked in that wonderful taste greedily. The haze that had accumulated in Chaos City for the past month seemed to have completely dispersed at this moment. All that was left was a delicacy that made him want to cry. Garland swallowed the roast duck in his mouth. As he wrapped a piece of duck meat, he asked, "Are you feeling it? I need to add some more inspiration." Milo picked up a piece of dough, and his chopsticks were already reaching for the roast duck. Chapter 22:05. The lunch service ended, and the satisfied customers left. Many of them were in a good mood and brought a picture book with them. The relaunched rum sold more than 200 bottles in one afternoon, and its picture book sold 600 copies. Molly and Eve looked at the gold and silver coins in the cash box that was almost overflowing, and they were shocked. They never thought that the box of picture books they sent would turn into a big box of money. "Molly, Eve, it's been hard on you. Go back and rest for a while. Come back at 4 in the afternoon and sell the remaining 400 copies. You're done for the day." Meg let the two of them off with a smile. 600,000 in the bank. This business was very good. Meg planned to give 50% of the money he earned from selling the picture books to Anne and let her use it herself. Meg planned to use the remaining 50% to invest in the whole comic industry. Since a gourmet magazine could sell millions of copper coins, this meant that the reading market was actually very big. The integration of the Northern continent was a trend, and it was also something that Meg would work hard to promote. In the future, there would definitely be works that would sell well all over the Northern continent. It could be a certain book or a certain comic. Of course, for comics to be popular, the printing problem had to be solved. With the super printing press, it wouldn't be difficult to get a simple printing press. Meg already had some ideas in his mind. Mr. Meg, Garland and Milo, who were waiting outside, came up with a smile. "Come in and have a seat." Meg smiled as he led the two into the restaurant. After making a pot of tea, Meg sat opposite the two and leaned back comfortably in the chair. "Mr. Mack, you didn't open the door for a month. You made us wait for so long," Garland said with a hint of bitterness. They had been waiting for Amy's for a month, but didn't see Meg open the door. They didn't even put in so much effort to chase girls. "I had to go out to get materials. I had no choice," Meg said with a smile, without a hint of guilt. After all, he had gone to do business. Now that they could sit here leisurely and have afternoon tea, they had to thank the soldiers who had sacrificed themselves on the front line. "I didn't get to eat the soup dumplings in the morning, but this knife-shaved noodles is really delicious, and the process of making is quite magical. You really created a perfect pastry with the ingredients you used this time," Milo praised, and his words and expression did not hide his admiration for Meg. "It's two," Meg corrected. Milo was taken aback for a moment before he smiled and said, "It seems that I have to get up early tomorrow." Actually, Meg still had some red oil wontons and hot dry noodles that he hadn't released yet. However, he couldn't spoil them and had to wait for another 2 days before releasing them. After all, he was preparing to rest the next day. In order to prevent being beaten up, it would be perfect if he released 2 new products after reopening the day after tomorrow. "Mr. Meg, you may not know this, but the last issue of Whole Foods sold over 1 million copies. It was the issue that you publish your column in." Garland looked at Meg and said excitedly. As an old comrade in the editorial office, he knew what kind of achievement such a sales volume was. "So you want to give me more money for that article?" Meg smiled. Garland choked. The reason why this issue of Whole Foods magazine was so popular was because of Meg's exclusive interview and the eggplant with garlic sauce tutorial written by Meg himself. It could be said that Meg had made Whole Foods and delicacies popular in this episode. There was a rule in the magazine world. No matter how popular your article was, the royalties were set in advance and would not change. However, as long as your article was popular, it meant that your next article would get a higher price. I need to discuss this with the boss. He hasn't had time to discuss this with me," Garland said cautiously. Although there were rules, Meg was now the most popular fried chicken in the gourmet world. The rules could be changed completely. "It's okay. I'm just kidding." Meg smiled. With 1 million copies of the magazine, the profit that their editorial office could make was estimated to be a few million. Even if he was given more money, a few $100,000 was not as good as the 2 girls selling albums for a whole afternoon. However, the hundreds of thousands of fans that Whole Foods brought to him was the biggest gain. Garland smiled, but he did not take Meg's words as a joke. He was going to go back and discuss the issue of royalties with the boss. Garland looked at Mag with a sincere expression and said, "We're here to discuss with Mr. Mag about continuing our collaboration. We'd like to sign an exclusive column with you. If you publish an exclusive column with Whole Foods, we'll pay you handsomely." Meg's sales volume. This had become a big consensus in the gourmet magazine world. In just a month, almost all the mainstream magazines published gourmet reviews about Mamie's, most of which were gourmet reviews. This shameless behavior made the magazines usher in the peak of magazine sales. However, compared with the millions of sales volume of Meg's eggplant with garlic exclusive tutorial, it was still a level lower. Because of this, Whole Foods clearly realized the importance of signing Meg's exclusive column. As long as they can sign Meg's exclusive column, Whole Foods will be invincible in the gourmet magazine world and open the God mode. Whole Foods has prepared enough chips for this, and with the previous cooperation as a foundation, Garland is still confident about this trip. "Sorry, I won't sign an exclusive agreement with any gourmet magazine." Meg shook his head and refused. Both Garland and Milo were stunned, and there was a bit of anxiety on their faces. Mr. Meg, your talent is amazing. We, Whole Foods, cherish the opportunity to cooperate with you very much. We look forward to working together in the future to create more brilliant achievements. We will create a series of magazines around you so that more people can see the story behind gourmet food. Garland looked at Meg and said sincerely, "If you're considering the problem of remuneration, I can guarantee you on behalf of Whole Foods and Meg that our offer will be the highest and most conscientious in the industry." "You misunderstood. I am not interested in money." He took a sip of tea and said calmly, "I just want more people to be able to appreciate different gourmet food." "Then what kind of cooperation are you looking forward to?" Garland's eyelids twitched a few times, and this sounded outrageous. "I have received a lot of invitations recently, and the prices are good, but I will not choose any magazine to sign an exclusive contract, but I intend to choose 10 magazines as partners to publish a gourmet column at the same time." Meg continued, "Whole Foods and Meg will be among these 10. Garland's expression was a little complicated, and he didn't know whether to be happy or sad. He came with a task this time. If he couldn't sign an exclusive contract, he would be torn apart by the boss when he went back. But Mr. Meg is obviously not an existence that can be shaken with a little money. Whether he's interested in money or not, it is a fact that he is rich. Chapter 22:06. Meg had a good impression of Whole Food Mart. After all, it was a situation where they helped each other. At least they were capable and not lousy teammates. But as he said, what he needed was to face a wider range of food lovers to increase his popularity. 1 million sales was the record for Whole Food Mart. But this was far from meeting Meg's needs. Even if it sold 1 million copies every issue, there would be many repeat readers. What he needed was more new fans to increase his faith and continue on the path of becoming a god through faith. Everyone said that he couldn't become a god on the Norland continent, but he wanted to try. Therefore, he needed more media to spread his name, so that more people could follow his cooking through different channels. Meg's attitude was honest and firm, and Garland wasn't someone who didn't know what was good for him. He could only finalize part of the cooperation agreement first to at least ensure that Whole Food Mart could have a place in this banquet. He needed to report the rest to his boss and wait for the next instructions. This was already beyond his authority. "Mr. Mack, your spirit is admirable," Milo said sincerely to Meg as he stood up and looked at him with admiration. He was really impressed by this young chef who was full of creativity. While other chefs were still guarding against each other and building high walls for the so-called inheritance, Meg was thinking about how to let more ordinary people make delicious food at home. That kind of selfless dedication and love for delicious food were all very moving. It was conceivable that Meg would definitely have a deep impact on the Norland continent's food structure. It could even be said that he would directly raise the level of Norland continent's food. He was a godlike existence in the world of food. Although Milo contributed to Whole Food Mart, he was first and foremost a gourmet. He deeply admired Meg's decision. This was a man who was destined to change the world, not just be a chef in a restaurant. "Thank you." Meg nodded with a smile. After sending the two of them off, Meg went on to meet the people in charge of a few magazines. These were the few powerful gourmet magazines that he had chosen with a wide range of coverage. Everyone was surprised when they heard Meg's proposal, but they quickly rejoiced that they at least had a chance to work together. One had to know that Whole Foods and Delicacies had the upper hand. With millions of sales, they would definitely have offered several generous conditions. Unexpectedly, they did not manage to get the exclusive rights in the end. Not being able to get an exclusive meant that it would be difficult to create a miracle like Whole Foods and Whole Foods that sold millions of copies. However, with Meg's personal gourmet teaching, they would definitely be able to get a share of this feast. The increase in sales was worth looking forward to. The signing went very smoothly. In one afternoon, Meg confirmed 10 gourmet magazines and agreed that the next submission time would be 3 days later. "Mama, this picture album is so beautiful, but I'm so hungry after reading it. I also want to eat the braised pork made by the little prince." A little girl of 5 or 6 years old was holding a picture album of the Little Mermaid and looking at the woman who was arranging flowers. If you want to eat red braised pork, you have to find Mr. Mac. Cat Ceylon put down the scissors in her hand and said with a smile. Then, is Mr. Mac the little prince? Alice's starry eyes lit up. Cat Ceylon was slightly taken aback. She thought that Mr. Mac must have been more handsome than the little prince when he was young, and could cook well too. He looked just as charming now. She nodded with a smile. If Chaos City has a prince, then Mr. Mac should be the gourmet prince. Gourmet prince. Then, can I marry him? I also want to eat red braised pork every day. I like meat, Alice asked expectantly. That will have to wait until our Alice grows up. After all, many women want to marry Mr. Mac, Cat Ceylon said with a smile. This little fellow was really not careless at all. She had chosen many women's dream lovers in one go. Alice tapped her little finger and said worriedly, Then, when I grow up, will Mr. Mac be snatched away by other bad women? If that's the case, there will definitely be a prince more suitable for Alice. He will bring more delicious meat to take you. Cat Ceylon smiled gently. Really? Alice swallowed her saliva as though she had already thought of delicious food. Alice, father brought back a talking bird. Come out and see. A little boy's voice came from outside. Brother, I'm coming. Alice answered and ran out with her short legs. Cat Ceylon watched Alice's back figure disappear at the door lovingly. Then, she sat down at the table and casually took the picture book that Alice was looking at earlier. This picture book was brought back by her man in the afternoon. He said that he bought it at Amy's. It was drawn by Mr. Mac's daughter. Alice loved it so much that she couldn't put it down. This was the first time she had seen it. The drawing is so exquisite. Cat Ceylin's eyes lit up as she looked at the cover of the picture book. The little mermaid sitting on the reef was obedient and cute. The moonlight shone on the surface of the sea and the stars in the sky. It was exquisite and beautiful. She had bought many picture books for her 2 children over the years, and her husband would occasionally bring some back from his trips to Rendezvous. Some of those books were quite expensive, but none of them could compare to this one in terms of quality. Cat Ceylon was attracted by the cover and flipped open the picture book. Soon, she was attracted by the beautiful pictures and the fascinating story. After a long time, Cat Ceylon slowly closed the picture book. Her eyes were wet. After a long time, she recovered from her sadness. So touching. This is really a good story. Cat Ceylon sniffed and sighed softly. She didn't expect a picture book drawn by a child to be such a touching love story. She couldn't get the love and even ended up in bubbles. The story of the little mermaid moved her. But why don't we go to Amy's for dinner tonight? I suddenly feel like eating red braised pork. Cat Ceylin's throat moved. She opened the picture book again and looked at the scene of the little prince making red braised pork for the little mermaid. Looking at the scene of the soft and delicious red braised pork being bitten open by the little mermaid, her stomach couldn't help but growl. But the preparation process is so detailed. Even the amount of ingredients is written clearly. It should be Mr. Mac's personal guidance, right? Or is a little prince based on Mr. Mac? I just don't know if the chef at home can make it. Cat Ceylon pondered, picked up the picture book, and walked to the kitchen. Madam, this dish looks a little complicated. We need some time to study and experiment. We should be able to make it. The head chef looked a little excited after reading the recipe of the red braised pork in the picture book. However, he didn't dare to say too much. But he was sure that this would be a very delicious dish. Because it came from Amy's, from the chef who was gradually becoming a god. Meg. He didn't expect him to put the recipe of the red braised pork in this picture book without hiding anything. Chapter 2207. What's the matter? What are you going to eat today? Georgina asked with a smile as she held Harrison's arm and bit into a candied hawthorn. 2 cute dimples appeared on her chubby cheeks. Harrison stared at her in a daze. Georgina blushed under his stare. She poked him with her crutch. I'm asking you a question. Of course we're going to Mamie's for a big meal, Harrison said with a smile. He then added, You look really good today. Boss Mag is back. Georgina completely forgot about the rest of his words. She stood up straight and exclaimed in delight. Yeah, Mamie's is open again today. Didn't you go to your aunt's for lunch today? So I'm taking you for dinner. Harrison nodded. Why didn't you say so earlier? If you had, I wouldn't have gone to my aunt's for lunch. Of course I'm going to eat Mamie's. Georgina was so angry that her cheeks puffed up. She glared at Harrison with a resentful look that said, "Hurry up and pacify me, or I'll explode. Here, as an apology, this is a birthday present for you." Harrison took out a picture album from his pocket. What's this? Georgina took the picture album that was still warm from Harrison. When she saw the cute little mermaid on the cover, her eyes lit up. So cute. After staring at the cover for a while, Georgina looked up at Harrison. This must be very expensive, right? She didn't know much about picture albums, but she knew that full-color picture albums were all hand-drawn by the artists themselves, so they were expensive. Moreover, the cover of this picture album was so beautiful. It must have been drawn by a super good artist, so it must be even more expensive. The most important thing is that you like it. Harrison smiled. Seeing Harrison's warm smile, Georgina's face quickly flushed. Her heart couldn't help but race. She lowered her head and said, "I like it a lot. Let's go. Let's find a place to sit for a while. It's still early for dinner." Harrison took Georgina's hand and walked toward the tea house in the distance. Mr. Mac really didn't lie to me. You can't go wrong if you believe in Mr. Mac. Harrison was exhilarated. Sure enough, Georgina liked this picture album. Of course, girls had no resistance to this kind of cute picture album. After racking his brains for an entire month, he finally managed to solve the problem on his birthday. He managed to suppress the heart-shaped stone in his heart. At 5 o'clock in the evening, Amy's opened on time. At this moment, Mo Li and Xia Hua had already completed their work for the day. They had sold 1,000 copies of the sketchbooks and collected their daily salary of 1,000 copper coins. After having dinner, they headed home. "Mr. Mac, is there really no Little Mermaid? It's my daughter's birthday tomorrow, and I want to give it to her as a birthday present," Harold said to Meg when he entered. "There will be another 1,000 copies tomorrow. They will be sold at noon." "You can come earlier," Meg said with a smile. "All right. Make sure to leave me a copy," Harold reminded him. He had just seen the picture album held by the customer at the front of the line and was attracted by the beautiful picture album. He thought that his daughter would definitely like such a picture album since it was her birthday tomorrow. Meg nodded slightly. He still had some recollection of the cute daughter of this middle-aged man in the workplace. Her name was Kathy, and she used to come here for breakfast occasionally with Harold. So this picture album was drawn by Mr. Mac's daughter. She's so amazing. Georgina looked at the signboard at the door. She was a little surprised, but she wasn't unhappy at all. That's right. Annie is indeed very powerful. Harrison nodded in agreement. Mr. Mac probably saved the world in his previous life to be so lucky to have two such outstanding and cute daughters. Not only did I not save the world in my previous life, but I was also cursed by a bunch of chefs to fall into the sea and drown, Meg thought as he turned around to enter the kitchen. However, he really did save the world in this life. Meg saw a lot of his old friends. Sardras sat outside the door with his brothers from the Burning Legion. They brought their own metal folding chairs and sat on them. Each of them had lava tattoos on their bodies, and they looked very imposing and eye-catching. However, among such a group of burly men, a little fellow in a white dress sat on the lap of the biggest demon without any fear. She asked softly, "Uncle Big Bald Head, did you use the gift I gave you?" A gentle smile appeared on Sardra's resolute face. He nodded and said, "I used it. It even saved my life." That day in the canyon, if it wasn't for the ice and fire lotus that flew out of the ring that Amy gave him at the last moment and blew up the ancient corpse in front of him, he would probably have fallen at the front line. His life was saved by Amy. The members of the Burning Legion also looked at Amy with doting gazes. "How is it? Isn't it very beautiful?" Amy asked. As brilliant as fireworks." "Then did you defeat the bad guys?" "I defeated a lot of bad guys and saved the world." Sardras nodded with a smile. "Oh yeah." Amy jumped down from Sardras' lap happily and ran into the restaurant. "Father," Uncle Big Bald Head said, "I saved the world." "Little boss is so cute," Mon said with a silly smile. "From now on, little boss will be the favorite of our Burning Legion. I will kill whoever dares to touch her." Sargeras said with a serious face. The members of the Burning Legion nodded solemnly. This was not a joke. Amy walked around the restaurant and stopped in front of a table by the wall. She looked at the two orcs sitting there and said in surprise, "Blockhead, you're finally here again." I'm here to eat the rainbow fried rice and also to see little Amy," Haga said with a silly smile. Haybang looked up from the pile of food and exclaimed, "How long has it been since we last came? There's so much good food. Mr. Mac is so awesome." Haga and Haybang, the two orc brothers, hadn't been to Chaos City for a long time. After the tribe was disbanded, they took a flying steed directly to Rodu to buy some things for the tribe. The first to come was, of course, Amy's. They couldn't forget Mr. Mac's food. They had sacrificed their lives on the front line, so they wanted to reward themselves with something good when they came back. The restaurant was still the same, but the menu had changed drastically. The variety of food was dazzling. Haybang took out an animal tooth dagger from his pocket and handed it to Amy with a smile. "For me." Amy took the dagger. The small and exquisite dagger was very sharp, and there were patterns engraved on the handle. It could be kept in a leather case. Amy waved the dagger. She looked at Haga and said, "I like it very much." "Thank you, Blockhead. As long as you like it." Hee. Haga smiled. He was also very happy. In the kitchen, Meg looked at this scene with a smile. He turned to Mia, who was about to bring out the dishes, and said, "Get a bottle of rum for the Orc brothers at table 12. Tell them it's my treat." Friends came from afar, so good wine was naturally a must. Chapter 2208. "Hello, Mr. Meg." Just as Mag was about to close the door after the dinner service, a light voice sounded. Meg opened the door again and was surprised to see Gloria standing outside. "I'm here to deliver your clothes." Gloria walked up, and Mars was unloading things from the horse-drawn carriage behind her. "But that black dress is a little complicated. Even though the tailors are already working overtime to make it, I'm afraid it'll take another 2 days to complete." "Are you in a hurry?" Gloria asked a little embarrassedly. "It's all right. Actually, I was just casually mentioning it the other day. These clothes are a little complicated, and the tailors must be tired out in the next 2 days." Meg was a little embarrassed. These clothes were prepared for the actors of the Black Cat Song Troupe. The actors of the Black Cat Song Troupe had good basic skills, but their costumes were really too shabby. You're sitting below the stage, watching a story about breaking free from the shackles of a wealthy family to pursue freedom and dreams, and the rich old man on the stage is wearing patched clothes made of coarse cloth. It's really like a play. Meg planned to make a trip to Rodu tomorrow to settle the issue of taking over Saipan Tavern. He also wanted to talk to Miss Black Cat about dreams and the future and give them some gifts. Meg took the clothes from Mars and said to Gloria, "Come in and have a seat." Gloria shook her head slightly and gently said, "No, it's already so late, and Mr. Meg just finished work. You must be very tired now. You should rest early. I won't disturb you any longer. Then, you guys should go back earlier. It's cold outside, so I'm sorry to trouble you to come all the way here personally," Mag said embarrassedly. He didn't expect Gloria to be so concerned about this. She was already a famous businesswoman on par with the Hill, a rising star in Chaos City, and a successor of Family Moriton. "I'll ask the craftsman to make the last dress as soon as possible and send it to you." Gloria said goodbye to Meg and left in the carriage. Mag watched the horse-drawn carriage disappear into the distance before he carried the pile of heavy clothes into the restaurant. "That little girl is quite concerned about you." Irina stood beside the counter and looked at Meg with a faint smile. "Gloria is indeed a very responsible person for her work," Mag said with a nod without blushing. After putting the clothes on the counter, Meg took out a piece of Chinese clothing and looked at it. The material was excellent, even better than what he had requested. The style was completely designed according to his requirements, and the degree of completion was very high. It seemed that Suede's tailoring team had been strengthened during this period of time. They were able to produce such high-quality products in such a short time. "I think everyone from the Black Cat Song Troupe will like it." Meg kept the clothes with satisfaction. This small gift was a little support for those who were chasing their dreams. Helena announced that she would go into seclusion after returning to the Wind Forest. Isn't that a little strange? Irina said as she looked at Meg, who was packing the clothes. She didn't get hurt at the front line, right? Meg was a little surprised. She didn't even meet an opponent that she could take seriously. How could she get hurt? That's indeed a little strange. Meg frowned. The situation in the Wind Forest was a little chaotic now, and it was the kind of chaos that Helena didn't want to see. The existence of the Night Elves had torn apart the hierarchy in the Wind Forest, and the flames of freedom had been ignited everywhere in the Wind Forest. The lower-class elves had started to stand up, and many elves who used to enjoy the treatment of nobles had started to reflect. The threat from Cthulhu had been removed, and the peace agreement had been signed. Logically speaking, the first thing that Helena should have done after returning to the Wind Forest was to start rectifying the chaos. She actually went into seclusion directly? She didn't make any other arrangements? Meg was curious. She only said that everything will be handled by Sally. There are no other arrangements. Irina nodded. Is she really going to lie down and not do anything? Meg had a suspicious look on his face. Although Sally was the princess chosen by Helena, she was also seen as a candidate for the Elven Queen. However, her sympathy for the Night Elves and lower-class elves was obvious to all, and it was not the same as Helena's attitude. Now that she suddenly announced that she was going into seclusion and threw the mess to Sally, he really didn't expect this. What do you plan to do? Meg asked Irina. I don't plan to do anything. Irina shook her head with a smile and said, let Sally try. After all, she's the Elven princess now, and I'm just the lady boss of Mamis. Meg also smiled when he heard that. Irina didn't want to go back and inherit the Elven Queen's position. If Sally could do it well, it would save her the trouble of taking over the throne again. For some people, power was addictive, but for others, it was just a burden. Irina was obviously the latter, and so was Meg. That was pretty good. Wasn't it better to stay by Mamis and be a carefree boss and lady boss than to worry about the world affairs every day? From today onwards, Sean Edward is the crown prince of the Roth Empire, and the only heir to the throne of the Roth Empire. A piece of news spread from the Roth Empire and attracted the attention of all the races. It was a little surprising, but also within the expectations of all the races. Josh was possessed by a demon and eventually died at the front line of the icy plains. Although Sean had lost an arm, he still got the crown prince's position for free. As for the third prince, who was obsessed with carpentry, no one would see him as a competitor for the throne. However, the feud between Sean and Alex had also become a matter of concern for many people. Alex had sealed the demon twice and saved the Norland continent from disaster. He had a very high reputation among all the races. He had once said that he would kill Sean. Now that Andre made Sean the crown prince of the Roth Empire, he probably had the intention of protecting him. If Alex insisted on killing Sean, he would become the archenemy of the Roth Empire. Alex, who was from the Roth Empire, would probably have to think about this carefully. Meg only found out about this when he arrived at Rodu the next day. Are we still going to kill him? Irina asked with a smile. We still have to kill him, but now is indeed not the time, Meg said with certainty with a nod. Saipan Tavern, which had been closed for many days, opened again. Master, you are finally back, Mara exclaimed excitedly as she poked her head out from the second floor. Meg turned back to look at his nominal disciple and smilingly said, I'm going out to play, and am back. AI Faye also poked half of her head out of the window to look at Meg and his family. She was surprised and surprised. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.